The young man leaves the house, announcing that he is going to the library. He walks up to the bike, rolls up his jeans and sets off. Two schoolchildren are walking down the street, talking about going to an internet club. Their conversation is interrupted by a guy riding a bicycle at high speed. The students freeze, not understanding what just swept past them. A cyclist sees an obstacle in the form of asphalt repairs appear on his way. But the young man easily overcomes this obstacle. He picks up speed and jumps over a hole in the ground. After driving a little further, the guy slides down the steps on which a couple of lovers were sitting. Seeing a bicycle rush past them, the couple freezes in horror. Jumping down the stairs, the young man slows down and, closing his eyes, continues the trip at the usual pace. There was a pandemonium of guys on the street. They were all admiring one of the guy's new bike. He clearly felt superior among other cyclists. There was a buzz around. Everyone was asking various questions, ranging from the cost of the bike, ending with the question of weight. The owner of this fashionable bike was a young man named Kim Tae-jin from Sangmo High School. The student was in his second year of study. Two guys admired the transport and asked Tae-jin if they could ride his bike. But the young man replied that they should be jealous in silence and ride their own. There were two guys standing to the side who were dissatisfied with Tae-jin's behavior and the fact that he had recently received a new bike and now bought another one. Tae-jin noticed how some guy was about to move off the hill. The crowd quickly switched from the topic of the new bike to that young man. The guys don't understand how he was going to perform this trick on a cross-country bike. Meanwhile, the young man at the top of the hill puts on a hood and prepares for the exit. He drives down the mountain, and the words of his parents fly through his head. They have been talking about excellent studies all their lives, because the heir of their family should be a talented person, with the highest achievements compared to the rest. The guy moves off the hill and performs skid braking. The tire on his bike is smoking because of the high speed, and in some places it began to fall off. The guys who watch this don't understand how he managed to perform skidding on a bicycle without brakes. When using this technique, the cyclist, in order to brake, must hold the pedals with the strength of his legs. Yoon Min-woo and Lee Jun-soo recognized the student council president in this guy. Ming-woo replied to his friend that since he stopped studying, he didn't care who the president was. But after this guy performed skidding at such a speed, Min-woo decides that they definitely need to say hello if they meet at school. There is a lot of noise at Taeyong High School. Students can be heard talking everywhere. The president is sitting in the classroom and, under the loud conversations of his classmates, is preparing for the upcoming lesson. A girl named Myung is sitting at the next desk, watching the student. The student's friend abruptly puts her hand on the girl's shoulder and asks why she looks so embarrassed. It's almost exam time, so my friend assumes that Myung is studying even harder. The girl also asked if Myung was additionally engaged in the student council these days. The girl smiles and replies that she is trying to cope. Deciding that Myung answers evasively, the friend jokingly asks if the president is offending her. The girl suddenly blushes and slightly stuttering answers in the negative. A friend notices Myung's strange behavior, so she decides to ask if the president has touched her. Upon hearing this, Myung quickly denies the words of the classmate. Then the friend says that grades are definitely important, but it seems to her that Jahyun takes it too seriously. She gets the impression that studying is the only thing he is capable of, and when someone tries to talk to him, he always responds as if all people are nothing to him. Then Myung objects, saying that Jahyun is not like that. According to the girl, he just can't express his emotions normally. The young man is very responsible and kind. After hearing this, Yoon-ha decides that her friend has fallen in love with Jahyun. A student enters the classroom and all the girls start shouting Min-woo's name. The students quickly surround the guy and start asking various questions. Yoon-ha is extremely unhappy that he showed up in their class at such an early hour, and on top of that, caused so much noise. Min-woo turns his gaze to the girl and sarcastically replies to her that he did not come to admire her. After the guy called the student pimply, she becomes enraged. The girl starts swearing at the young man for the whole class, and Myung tries to calm her friend down, explaining that the twins should not fight with each other. All this was watched by Han Nam, who admired Yoon-ha. He thinks the girl is cute, even when he's angry. Meanwhile, Ming-woo, muttering to himself, swears at his sister. Already on the way out of the classroom, the young man notices Jahyun. He approaches the student and greets him in English. Jahyun looks up at the unknown guy and declares that he is now very focused on studying, so if the young man has nothing to do with him, then it's not worth distracting him. Then Min-woo puts his hand on Jahyun's notebook and asks if he rides a bike. He also offers to join their team. The student looks at Ming-woo as if he didn't understand what the young man was talking about. Then Mingwu says that his descent yesterday was done abruptly. Seeing that descent, that trick with skidding, everyone was shocked. The guy had no idea that someone from school was riding a cross-country bike. And besides, he is also the president of the school. Therefore, Minwoo specifically came to personally invite Jaehyun because he wants to work with him as a teammate. But Jaehyun doesn't care about it. He looks down at the notebook again and starts writing something there. Minwoo gets angry and tells Jaehyun that he could at least pay attention to who is talking to him. Noticing how his brother is talking to Jaehyun, Yoonha becomes interested in what they are talking about. In response to Mingwoo's suggestion, the student replies that he is not interested in such things. Jaehyun also says that if the young man has finished speaking, he asks not to distract him from his studies anymore. Minwoo gets even more annoyed, but he still leaves, saying after him that he is really sorry that he disturbed Jaehyun. When the student left, the president remembered how his uncle had given him a bicycle for the boy's 13th birthday. That day, the man said that this bike had been with him since when he was a professional racer. Uncle would like Jaehyun to take care of the bike properly. The man then said that studying was good, but the uncle wanted Jaehyun to have fun on the street sometimes. My uncle also promised that when Jaehyun was good enough to skate, he would take him to the competition with him. The school day ends and the students begin to go home. Yoonha yawns after a hard day and complains that another day of her youth has been wasted. Myung smiles and, in order to encourage her friend, says that the holidays will begin after the exams. Yoonha complains that she is a young blooming girl. She does not want to believe that this year will end without romance. The girl is tired of the routine. It's the same every day: school, courses, home. The friend replies that Yoonha would not be a pessimist. In any case, they will have something good to remember in the future. While the girl continues to complain to her friend, Han Nam suddenly runs up to them and offers Yoonha to watch a zombie movie. The girls are very scared of the appearance of a classmate, so Yoonha hits the guy in the stomach. After Yoonha yelled at a classmate for following her, they decided to leave. Khan shouted after us that he had a new TV at home with a large diagonal. The girl gets angry and answers him that she has courses today, so the girl does not have time to watch the movie. Despite the fact that sunset is coming on the street, Jaehyun is still in the classroom. The young man looks out the window and collects his textbooks in a briefcase. Suddenly there are footsteps in the classroom. The president turns around and sees Minwoo. The guy clears his throat and informs that he has come to ask again about joining the team. If Jaehyun really doesn't want it, then he doesn't need to join the team. But among the guys there are those who are not averse to competing with the president. Therefore, Mingwoo suggests to come and compete with someone from the team tonight. Jaehyun again refuses this offer and is about to leave. Then Minwoo decides to tell the president about Kim Tae-jin, who insulted the young man's bicycle, saying that only an abnormal person can proudly drive around on such scrap metal. Upon hearing about this, Jaehyun becomes enraged. Minwoo adds that he doesn't care if the president comes, but it was funny to watch this incompetent turn up his nose, although he has nothing to count on but a bicycle. So Minwoo thought it would be nice if Jaehyun defeated Tae-jin and his bike. Finally, the young man tells the president that they are going to the Green Park in the evening. It was dark outside and the teams were already in the park. There is a noise, guys can be heard talking from everywhere. Some perform various workouts. Minwoo is sitting on a bench to the side and listening to music. Junsu approaches him and puts a cold can of energy drink to the guy's face. Minwoo is startled by the surprise, and a friend hands him a drink. Junsu asks a friend if Jaehyun will be here, because it's already quite late. Minwoo replies that he doesn't care about it. The elder agrees with the words of his friend, saying that if he does not appear, they will compete without him. Junsu then decides to ask Minwoo why he is so obsessed with Jaehyun. The young man did not expect this question, so he begins to get angry. He says that this is not an obsession and reasons for riding together are not needed. In addition to all this, Jaehyun controls his bike well, which means that he probably devoted a lot of time to riding. At the end, Minwoo adds that riding with someone is more fun than being alone. Tae-jin appears in the park, who asks about the student council president with an evil grin on his face. Minwoo replies that he should just wait. Tae-jin continues to anger the young man, saying that Jaehyun was just scared, that's why he didn't come. When Minwoo offers to ride with him as a warm-up, one of the guys calls him, announcing that Jaehyun has come. The voices of guys who are discussing the president are heard everywhere. Jaehyun moves forward, and Tae-jin holds out his hand, but the young man ignored him. The guy approaches Minwoo and asks him to start the competition as soon as possible. The young man replies that the Sunbi from their school will explain the rules. A guy approaches and introduces himself by the name of Junsu and adds that he is a third-year student. The president bows, introducing himself by name, and Min-woo is angry that Jahyun ignored him, and with Jin-soo he behaves kindly. Jun-soo shows the route that the participants of the race should take. He also explains the simple rules. 1. On one they start in the park. The one who returns to the park first is the winner. In case of any emergency, 4 guys were placed in the corners, so they can follow the route without fear. Min-woo points to the president's opponent, Tae-jin. Jahyun says that after today's race, you no longer need to bother him with the idea of joining the team. Min-woo agrees, and Jun-soo hands Jahyun a helmet for safety. Min-woo examines Shaheng's bike and notices that he has removed the brakes to reduce weight. The participants of the race stand at the start. The observers shout out the name of Tae-jin and wish him victory. Tae-jin is sitting on a bike and tells Jahyun that it will be difficult to keep up with a carbon bike on such a bad bike, so you will have to strain. Min-woo, who heard Tae-jin's words, replies to stop bragging and focus on the race. The guy was angered by Min-woo's words, but there was no time to swear. Jun-soo puts a camera on his helmet and says he will follow the participants to record the race. The guy standing at the start announces that the race will start when the gear falls out of his hands and touches the ground. The young man releases the object from his hands. The sound of falling metal is heard, and the participants of the race start. As expected, Tae-jin will be the first to start on his carbon bike. Jun-soo says that the real race will begin when the bikes accelerate from pedaling. A quick start does not always guarantee victory in the race. The young man accelerates to take off the race. Tae-jin turns his head back and starts taunting Jahyun. According to the guy, the president will not be able to win on his scrap metal. Hearing these words, the young man begins to accelerate. When Tae-jin noticed this, he realized that if Jahyun went at this pace, he could win. But the guy does not intend to give his victory to the president. Therefore, after seeing the traffic cones, Tae-jin begins to demolish them with the rear wheel of a bicycle to cause trouble to the president. Jahyun sees that he is about to crash, so he starts dodging the obstacle and loses his balance. The young man notices the car, and in order not to crash into it, flies over the transport. The young man jumps off the car and continues driving. And Jun-soo and Tae-jin are genuinely surprised by this trick. No one expected that Jahyun would do this. Jun-soo starts yelling at Tae-jin for causing trouble. He just laughs it off, saying that his foot flew off the pedal. Jahyun starts to catch up with the opponent and says that we need to finish this dirty race as soon as possible. The participants reach a sharp turn, and the president begins to accelerate and uses drift. No one expected that Jahyun would enter the turn in a slide. Tae-jin gets angry, and the president turns to him and points at his back, saying that now he will have to contemplate his back. The opponent becomes enraged and promises to win. Tae-jin starts to speed up, and Jahyun tells him not to waste time and finish everything in 4 minutes. The guy gets furious and replies that the president should not be so self-confident. Jun-soo follows the participants and says that the more adventurous the race, the greater the risk of an accident. The young man hopes that the race will end without incident. Ahead of the rivals there is a steep descent, and they begin to accelerate. Jun-soo shouts at the guys to stop because there is a fence in front of them that blocks the road at the end of the descent. Tae-jin is obsessed with winning, so he doesn't hear what the young man is saying. Jahyun sees the fence in front of him, so he slides down the slope, breaks sideways and pushes off with his foot from the fence. Tae-jin doesn't have time to slow down, so he crashes into a fence at high speed. The president turns around to see what happened. He sees Tae-jin fall off his bike and blood starts dripping from his head. Min-woo is playing a mobile game and hears the guys start shouting that someone is going to the finish line. The young man is distracted and loses. He is angry at this, because the guy was going for a record. The guys meet Jahyun. They are extremely surprised that Tae-jin lost in this race. Min-woo gets up from the bench and says that this race confirms it is not the bike that is important in the competition, but the ability to pedal. While everyone is discussing Tae-jin's loss, the president drives up to Min-woo. He asks him to take care to keep the promise that Min-woo made before the race. Jahyun takes off his helmet and throws it into Min-woo's hands and asks not to disturb him at school anymore. The president puts a hood on his head and leaves the park. Jun-soo appears, leading the injured Tae-jin. He asks someone to give first aid. While questions are starting to pour in from everywhere about what happened, Tae-jin is furious and asks to bring Jahyun to him. Jahyun goes into the house and announces his return. The younger brother, Jo Woo-hyung, comes out into the corridor. The boy says that his parents are not at home. They will work overtime tonight. The child asks his brother why he goes somewhere at night. Woo-hyung begins to scold his older brother. He says that with such success, he will never get into a good college if Jahyun does not study. Next year the guy has exams, and all he does is ride at night with friends. The boy does not have time to finish. A voice comes from the TV, which announces the beginning of the cartoon days with Meow Meow. The boy takes off and hits the threshold. He stumbles and falls to the floor, curling up in pain, but immediately forgets about the bruise, because his favorite show has started. Jahyun, after watching this, decides to leave in silence. The young man goes into the bathroom, puts dirty things in the laundry basket and gets under the shower. The guy closes his eyes and remembers about today's race. Every moment is clearly remembered by him. He looks in the mirror and does not understand what kind of feeling he is experiencing right now. The next morning, Jahyun goes outside to go to school. He looks at his bike and sees the ruined tires from yesterday's race. Woohyun comes out of the house and asks what happened to the bike. After seeing the injured tire, the boy asks his brother if he was really going to ride this bike to school. The president ignores his brother's words and, having prepared for the trip, gets on his bike and leaves. While Woohyun was swearing under his breath at his brother, a cat ran near him. The boy began to admire the cat loudly, and the animal got scared and ran away. Mian barely squeezes into a bus full of people. 2 schoolchildren are standing next to her, complaining about the daily jostling. One of them says that you need to buy some kind of moped, because while he gets to school, he gets very tired. The girl didn't understand what the guys were talking about. Suddenly, she noticed Jahyun, who was passing by the bus quickly. Mian's face blushed, and a question popped up in her mind. Why does the president get to school by bike? Han Nam sits in the car and complains about the slow traffic. The personal driver turns to the young gentleman. He asks if the guy wants the man to push the cars out of the way, and then they will pass without problems. The student turns back to the window and answers the driver that there is no need to do this. Han Nam also sees a passing Jahyun and his eyes light up with delight. He says that he also wants a bike. The president is rapidly driving through the resulting traffic jam at high speed. Suddenly, he notices a man on a bicycle out of the corner of his eye. The young man turns his head and recognizes him as the director. The man smiles radiantly and greets the student in English. Jahyun wishes the director a good morning. The man answers him that he did not expect anything else from the president of the student council. The young man is full of energy since the morning. The guy asks if the principal always rides a bike to school. The man lifts his sunglasses, grins and replies that a real man is obliged to ride a bicycle to school. In addition, it is useful and pleasant to drive, but you need to be extremely careful and observe safety measures. Cyclists are not welcome either on the roadway or on the footpath, so you need to drive carefully and with great care. The director looks at the bike path on which the car is traveling and says that these paths are actually unsafe. After finishing his monologue, the man says that they should hurry up, because the director and the president of the student council should not be late. A teacher is standing at the school gates, and students with unusual hair colors and hairstyles are doing push-ups around him. A boy named Lee Hulan with bright orange hair color drives past a man on a skateboard. He is in the 3rd grade in his 2nd year of study. The young man greeted the man with a wave of his hand. The teacher grabs the kid by the collar, calling him an overgrown squirrel. A man scolds Hulan for making his hair look like he poured orange juice on it. Then the teacher becomes enraged when he notices that the young man does not have a badge and a briefcase. The guy replied that he was tired of them, and when the man is going to scold the kid again, the director and Jaheng come. The director asks the teacher why to shout like that in the morning. Seeing the director, the man began to smile as if nothing had happened and replied that he was educating students. The director looks at the students and says that their uniqueness adds its own unique charm to the school, so we should continue in the same spirit. The students scatter to the classrooms, and Hulan notices 2 girls. He runs to them and offers to join them for a snack. When the students notice the guy, one of them jokingly replies that she would like to have a pet like this kid. Hulan was offended by this, but still continued to chat with the girls. This was observed by the principal, the teacher and Jaheng. The teacher was angry at the guy, and the director laughed at him kindly. The teacher reminds the principal that a morning lecture is due to take place today. The man replies that he is tired today, so he offers to drink a cup of cocoa and finish it. There is a noise in the classroom. Students are chatting about something and waiting for the anniversary of their school, because on this day students do not study. Yoonha shows his girlfriend a funny message from the director, but Myung does not listen to her friend. The girl does not take her eyes off Jahyun. She wonders why he came to school today on a bicycle. Han Nam appears in the classroom, who calls the girl Unishechka. The student is very scared and throws a book at a classmate. The guy just smiles, because this is a fiery manifestation of love. Jaehyun leaves the classroom reading a book. Walking down the corridor, he meets Minwoo, who, as always, was surrounded by girls. Minwoo turns around and asks the president if he has seen the race video that Jun-soo uploaded. At the end, the young man added that the race turned out great. Jaehyun listened to the disciple in silence and without answering anything, went on. During the school day, Han-nam slept or bothered Yoon-ha. At one of the lessons, Myung turned towards Jaehyun. When the girl noticed a classmate's gaze on her, she blushed and quickly turned away. The lessons are over, and the children go home. Han-nam notices Jaehyun, who was putting on gloves. The guy approached the president and asked him to ride a bike once, but Jaehyun ignored his words. The young man got on his bike and left. Having quarreled with a student, Kan-nam hears a familiar voice. Yoon-ha interrogates a friend about whether she likes Jaehyun, and the girl denies everything. The young man runs up to the girls, and Yoon-ha is angry at the guy as usual. Han-nam puts his hands behind his head and confidently says that Yoon-ha will not be able to avoid his Wi-Fi sensors. The girl does not understand what she has sinned in her past life, that she was punished by this guy. The student turns to the girls and says that his skin is unusually smooth today. Yoon-ha gets angry and replies that his face is just swollen from sleeping all day. Kan just laughs at us in response and tells the girl that she is very witty, and he just needs an hour of daytime sleep. The girl loses her temper and hits the guy, asking him to shut up. Jaehyun is driving down the street and notices that the bike has a flat tire. He stops and inspects his transport. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice asking if he can fix this scrap metal for the president. The young man turns around and notices Tae-jin with his friends. A ferocious grin appears on Tae-jin's face, and he says that he did not recognize Jaehyun in these glasses. Han-nam is walking down the street and thinking about how Yoon-ha was frantically expressing her love today, that the young man's whole body aches. He says that dating is a big burden for the body and mind. But it's not scary, because today the guy slept well at school, and now he can go about his business. Suddenly Han-nam notices Jaehyun and Tae-jin. The bully says that the president seems to have slept well yesterday, and he was furious that he lost yesterday's race, also hurt his head, so he couldn't sleep at all. Jaehyun abruptly interrupts Tae-jin and asks him who he is. The three guys freeze in shock for a split second, and then Tae-jin is furious. The guy kicks Jaehyun's bike, and the young man, seeing this, becomes enraged. The bully says that the president disgraced him by winning the race on this piece of scrap metal. Then Jaehyun loses his temper and hits Tae-jin in the face. Tae-jin's friends are getting angry. They think that the president just believed in himself after yesterday's victory. The guys start making fun of Jaehyun in every possible way, and Tae-jin takes off his glasses and steps on them. The hooligans struck several blows to the face, and the president was on the ground. Tae-jin squats down to get a better look at the young man's face. The bully says that it will be difficult for the president to attend school when his face is in such a state. Jaehyun repeats that he doesn't remember Tae-jin and doesn't want to remember. He asks again who he is and asks the bully to leave. Then the guy decides to hit the president again to improve his memory. Tae-jin grabs the young man by the collar of his shirt, when suddenly a voice is heard not far from them, asking them to stop. Everyone turns to the source of the sound and sees a guy with a band-aid over his lip. Kan tells us that for men, 3 against 1 is humiliating. He throws his briefcase over the ground, kneads his fingers and asks if he can join. Tae-jin was about to attack Han-nam, when suddenly one of his friends tells the guy that this man is very dangerous. He whispers something in Tae-jin's ear and beads of sweat appear on his forehead. The bully turns to the president, saying that he should thank fate for his friend being nearby. The 3 guys leave, and Kan tells us that they just got scared and ran away. Then he smiles broadly and adds that this is the royal will in action. Han-nam holds out his hand to help Jaehyun up, but the young man gets up from the ground by himself. The president says that everything is fine with him, and asks you not to pay attention to him and go your own way. Minwoo walks down the street again surrounded by girls who offer him to go to karaoke. Tae-jin and his friends pass by them, who say that they did not expect anything else from the major. Due to the fact that he has money, the guy is always surrounded by girls, adds Tae-jin. The young man ignores their words and notices a familiar guy in the distance. Minwoo walks away from the girls and apologizes to them. Then he suggests going to karaoke another time and goes to Jaehyun. Kan notices to us that the president's bike is broken and he looks bad, so he offers the guy to bring him home. Minwoo approaches them and, seeing Jaehyun's face, asks about what happened. Han tells us that the guys from Sangmo High School beat him 3 times, and he intervened and scared them away with his royal will. After hearing about the 3 guys from Sangmo, Minwoo realizes that it was Tae-jin who decided to recoup for the victory in this way. Jaehyun intervenes in the conversation and asks if they had a good time and asks them to go home. Mingwoo bends his head and apologizes for calling the president to the team, because if he hadn't done that, nothing would have happened. Jaehyun replies that everything is fine and asks not to bother him with racing anymore. Minwoo agrees and tells Jaehyun to go to the pharmacy and buy everything he needs to treat wounds. The president waves it off, saying that everything is fine with him. After receiving such an answer, Minwoo intends to follow Jaehyun to escort him home. The student again asks not to bother him, and Han Nam decides to do something. He walks up to Jaehyun and hits him on the neck. Because of this blow, the young man loses consciousness and falls to the ground. Minwoo gets scared of this and asks what he just did. Han explains to us that if it wasn't for him, they would have continued to argue further. The guy lifts Jaehyun on his shoulder and asks Minwoo to take the president's bike, and Han Nam, in turn, promises to take care of the guy. After walking some distance, Minwoo decides to ask Han Nam where they are going. The guy replies that he doesn't know. Then Minwoo decides to ask if he knows where Jaehyun lives. The guy says no, but they keep going anyway. Minwoo comes out of the pharmacy with a bag in his hands, which contained everything necessary for wound treatment. Han Nam lowers Jaehyun to the ground, who is still unconscious. Woo Hyun returns home and checks the time on his phone. Then the boy turns his head and notices 3 guys from Taeyong High School. He sees one of them lying on the ground, so the boy thought the other 2 had killed him. Looking more closely at the face of the guy who was lying on the ground, Woo Hyun recognizes him as his brother. He calls him Hyun and Minwoo and Han Nam turn around. The child starts to panic because the bullies saw him. Han Nam picks up Jaehyun's body and asks the boy if he knows this guy. The boy mumbles that he doesn't know him and is about to leave. Deciding that the child is lying, Minwoo asks if he resembles someone. The guys compare the boy's face with Jaehyun's face and notice that the child's behavior was suspicious. Woo Hyun walks at a brisk pace and tries to keep calm while Han Nam, who has Jaehyun on his shoulder, and Minwoo has the president's bike, are running after him. The guys wave their hands and ask to stop because the boy called Jaehyun Hyun. The guys still manage to catch up with Woo Hyun and explain to him that they are not hooligans. Friends ask the boy about how he could run away, leaving his brother to his fate. The child replies that his life is dearer to him. After receiving such an answer, Minwoo and Han Nam were once again convinced that he was a small copy of the president. The guys bring Jaehyun to the house and begin to treat the wounds on the young man's face. After the friends have plastered the president's entire face with plasters, they praise each other for the work done. Woo Hyun, who has been watching these, doubts that these guys are students of a prestigious school. Minwoo draws attention to the patch under Han Nam's nose and asks why he is wearing it. Han tells us that this has its own secret, but Minwoo is still on secrets, so he tears the plaster off the student's face. Han Nam grabs his face and starts to get angry, and Minwoo says that if the disciplinary committee sees this, he will be punished. Minwoo decides to ask Woo Hyun if there is anyone at home besides them. The boy replies that his parents are usually not at home. Minwoo replies that the same situation is happening at his house, and the guy decides to inspect the president's room. He sees a large number of books and concludes that Jaehyun lives boring. Minwoo then asks the boy why he is standing in the room as a supervisor. Woo Hyun replies that he is following them because he doubts they are his brother's friends. In addition to this, the child makes sure that the guys do not inadvertently steal something from the house. He says it this way that it's nonsense that Jaehyun has friends. After these words, Minwoo was once again convinced that they were brothers. Han Nam comes up to the table and says that this bike is similar to the one that Jaehyun rides. Minwoo approaches the guy from behind and sees a photo frame showing little Jaehyun and a man unknown to them with a bicycle. After reviewing the photo, the guys thought that Woo Hyun was depicted on it. But the boy replies that this photo was taken when Jaehyun was in elementary school. The guys were extremely surprised by this, because in the photo the president looks unusually cheerful. Minwoo starts muttering about the fact that the president has been riding this bike since childhood. If you think about how he didn't want to race against Taejin, but Minwoo now understands what finally made Jaehyun change his mind. Han Nam turns to Minwoo to ask what he's mumbling about and sees Yoonha in the guy. He doesn't understand why he's seeing a girl. Han Nam still doesn't know that Yoonha and Minwoo are twins. Minwoo looks at the man's face in the photo and realizes that he has already seen him somewhere. Behind them, a voice is heard asking who the guy saw. Jaehyun gets up from the bed and tells him to put the frame back in place. Then he asks what they forgot in someone else's house. The guys turn around and see that the president has come to his senses. The guy walks up to the guys and snatches the frame out of Min-woo's hands. He asks to stop touching other people's things and leave his house. Min-woo replies to Jaehyun that he is not being hospitable because they brought him here and treated his wounds. The young man brings a mirror to the president's face, and Khan tells us that he cannot thank them. But Jaehyun peels off all the plasters from his face and tells them that he doesn't have the strength to bicker, so they should leave. Han Nam puts his hand on Jaehyun's shoulder and says it's depressing when friends leave without having fun. The president, in turn, replies that they have never been his friends. Then the guys decide to open Jaehyun's computer to find something interesting there. But after opening the computer, the guys were disappointed. There were only video files with various lessons on the desktop. Han Nam, seeing this, says that he has never seen such a dull computer as Jaehyun's. The president asks not to desecrate his computer, but Han Nam ignores his words and downloads a new video to his desktop. Woo Hyun was going to go to the course, but before that he decided to go to his brother's room to warn about his departure. Entering the room, the boy saw three guys watching a video downloaded by Han Nam. He freezes in the doorway and thinks that he will never be alone with his brother again. After finishing it, Han Nam, Min-woo and Woo Hyun are going to go about their business. Jaehyun stays in the room to delete the video from his computer, but decides to reopen it before deleting it. At this moment, Woo Hyun enters the room again to convey mom's words. Min-woo and Han Nam go outside discussing the video they watched. The second one promises to send a video in the messenger, and the newly made friends say goodbye. Min-woo takes out his phone and, after waiting for the other end to pick up the phone, starts talking. The young man announces an emergency meeting of the team members tonight. In particular, T-Jin's boys from Sangmo High School should appear there. There is a noise in the park. The guys are discussing why Min-woo so suddenly decided to gather them all, because they usually don't meet on such days. T-Jin appears and says that if they have any complaints about Min-woo, then they should say everything in person instead of discussing it behind their backs. Everyone turns towards T-Jin and starts asking him about why he is a special guest today. The guy grins and says that everyone is dancing to Min-woo's tune as always. Jun-soo intervenes in the conversation, who says that after Min-woo created the team, it was right to follow him. Besides, there's probably a reason he called them together today. T-Jin replies that the guy stands up for Min-woo only because they are both from Taeyong High School. Jun-soo starts to get angry, but the main one appears. His expression was sinister, so the guys were interested in Min-woo's mood. The young man takes his hand out of his pocket and, removing the ring from his hand and ignoring all questions, hits T-Jin in the face. The guy falls to the ground, and his friends help him up. The guys begin to calm down Min-woo and T-Jin, asking them to just talk. Min-woo starts first. He says that T-Jin and his friends have disgraced the Zephyros, so he kicks them out of the team. No one understands what the main one is talking about, including T-Jin. Min-woo says that he does not want his team to be somehow connected with people who take revenge for losing the race with their fists. T-Jin realized that he was talking about the president and said that Jaehyun hit him first. T-Jin also suggests that Min-woo leave the team. He adds that the team is more unhappy with Min-woo than with him. Words are heard from the crowd that Min-woo called them at such a time without warning. And to all this, the president of the Taeyong school is not a member of the team. One of the guys said that kicking the guys out of Sangmo High School was too much. After hearing the words of support, a grin appears on T-Jin's face, and he says that Min-woo should leave the team. In addition to this, the young man cannot ride a bicycle because of an injured leg. When the guys started talking about the young man's money, Min-woo suggests that T-Jin arrange a race. The one who loses, leaves. Everything is in the style of the Zephyros team. Jun-soo is shocked after such a statement from a friend. T-Jin, in turn, grins and asks if Min-woo can pedal with his foot. The young man replies that even a one-legged man can defeat him. T-Jin says that since Min-woo wants 3 to leave, then we need to arrange a 3-on-3 race. The chief replies that this is not necessary. He can win alone. Jun-soo says he will participate too. Min-woo tries to stop his friend, but he replies that it is impossible to win with his injury. When it turns out that the competition will be held between the two schools, T-Jin asks the crowd if any of them want to stand up for the elder Taeyong. All the guys turn away and are silent. Jun-soo stops the guy, saying that this is unnecessary, and the competition will only be between Taeyong and Sangmo. Hulan has a dream about how a dragon appears in front of him, fulfilling wishes. The young man asks the creature to turn him into a handsome man. The dragon holds out the mushroom and says that as soon as the guy eats it, the wish will come true. The young man becomes a tall, handsome guy in a classic English coat that looks good only on tall young men, a slender body, but so harmonious as if hinting at the muscles hidden under the clothes. All the girls' attention is immediately focused on this guy. They ask for his phone number. Someone asks if he has a girlfriend. But the dream is interrupted and Hu Lan wakes up. Opening his eyes, he sees in front of him a beautiful girl who put a small box of milk on his desk. The guy rubs his eyes from sleep, and the girl says that he looks happy. The boy mutters something to himself, and the girl asks him again. Hu Lan waves it off, thanking the girl for the milk and calling her algae because of the green color of her hair. The young man opens the milk and begins to drink it, feeling how calcium flows through his veins, stimulating his growth. Suddenly, a guy appears behind Hu Lan, who grabs him by the neck and offers to go to the dining room. The young man is angry at him for spilling milk through his fault. The guy does not calm down and starts kissing him on the head, asking him to go with him to eat. The girl takes out her phone and starts taking pictures of what is happening. There are guys standing in the corridor by the window. Junsu asks Minwoo about what he will do. The young man replies that he will simply win and expel T-Jin from the team. A friend says he was referring to his injury. Minwoo puts his hands behind his neck and replies that the doctor says that cycling contributes to recovery. Then Junsu realizes that the doctor just doesn't know how he drives. Junsu also says that this is not the best way to get back into the saddle. An even bigger role is played by the difference in physical shape. It seems to Sunbi that if Minwoo's leg was fine, he wouldn't worry about the race. Then Junsu comes up with the idea of asking President Jaehyung for support, because he is also involved in what happened. Minwoo denies this idea and asks to leave this bookworm alone. He doesn't want to involve him in the team's affairs anymore. From all these thoughts, Junsu started to have a headache, and a friend says that they will definitely come up with something and will never lose to the guys from Sangmo. Jaehyun is sitting at his desk and drawing a bicycle in his notebook. Myung approaches him and leaves special patches on the table. The young man looks up at the girl uncomprehendingly. She explains that it needs to be applied to the wounds so that they pass faster. The guy replies that he didn't ask her to buy something like that. Yoonha comes up to them and slaps loudly on the desk. She asks Jaehyun if it's really that hard to just take what the girl gives and thank her. The girl also adds that Myung was so worried that she ran to the pharmacy this morning. Before she can finish, Myung covers her friend's mouth with his palm. Han Nam comes up to Jaehyun from behind and slaps him loudly on the back. The girls do not understand when these two manage to become friends. Han smiles broadly at us and replies that they are brothers who have become friends through the monitor. The friends look at each other, still not understanding what Han Nam is talking about. A guy enters the class and informs Jaehyun that the third-year student asks him to go out into the corridor for a second. The young man abruptly rises from his chair and leaves. Han Nam continues to try to win Yoonha's heart and offers her to build a strong friendship between them as well. The girl gets angry again and pushes the guy away from her. Jaehyun goes out into the hallway and Junsu, noticing the guy's face, understands why Minwoo was so angry at T-Jin yesterday. The president stares at Sunbi and is silent. Junsu then decides to ask if Jaehyun remembers him. After 5 minutes of explanations, it turns out that Jaehyun has prosopagnosia, poor memory for faces. When the president finally recognized Sunbi, Young-soo turns to the president with a request. He talks about how Minwoo got angry because T-Jin's friends beat him up and caused trouble. Although Minwoo asked not to involve Jaehyun in the team's affairs, Junsu would like the president to take him against Senior Sangmo tonight. The young man apologizes and says that he no longer wants to get involved with these people. Junsu understands this, but if they lose today, Minwoo will be kicked out of the team that he himself assembled. Jaehyun replies that he doesn't care, and if Sunbi bothered him because of such a trifle, then he leaves. The president turns around and is about to return to class. Young-soo then tells him that it starts at 8 o'clock in the evening. They gather in the same park as before. If Jaehyun changes his mind, then he can come. Junsu really hopes so. Finally, the guy apologizes to Jaehyun for taking up a lot of his time and wishes him all the best. In the evening, the guys gathered in the park and everyone was wondering who would win this race. Junsu was sitting on a bench and preparing for the upcoming race. Minwoo approaches a friend and says that they will be starting soon. The elder looks at his watch and realizes that Jaehyun is not coming. The start of the race is announced and 3 guys from Sangmo School, 2 from Taeyong are moving to the start. Junsu pays attention to T-Jin's bike and sees that because of that unsuccessful race, he attached the front brake to the bike, and even replaced the wheel with 88mm carbon fiber. T-Jin does not miss the opportunity to laugh at Minwoo, so he asks him how much time has passed since he last saw him on the bike. He adds that Minwoo should not overdo it, because he can damage the second leg. Minwoo asks Taejin to shut up and get ready for the race. The guy at the start is going to briefly explain the rules of the race, but he is interrupted by the sound of the engine. A girl drives up to the start. She introduces herself as a journalist named Rim, a bicycle racing streamer for the Paprika TV internet project. Many guys found this name strange. Rim asked if they would mind if she did an online stream today. Minwoo drives up to her and says that he won't mind if his race is filmed by such a pretty stranger. Taejin is also happy about this news, because it will not just be a victory, but a public humiliation. The girl puts on headphones and checks the signal. Rim greets his subscribers who follow the races. The presenter starts explaining the rules again. He says that today's race is a relay race. Team members need to pass the baton to their partner. The guy is holding blue and red lead trackers in his hands, explaining that they will be used instead of sticks. Partners will be placed on points and have to wait. The team that first delivers the lead to the finish line is the winner, and the losers will be excluded from the team. The host asks Minwoo if he is sure he will be able to participate in the race. The guy didn't understand why the presenter asked this question. Then the young man explained that the race was 3 against 2. Physically and strategically, their team has less chance of winning. Minwoo tells him not to worry about trifles. 3 against 2 or 4 against 2, they just need to win. The young man passes lead trackers to the team members, and the guys begin to prepare for the start. Minwoo and Taejin start arguing again, and Rim prepares the camera for the upcoming race. Before the start, Minwoo asks Junsu to take care of Lee Min-hyun, because this is his first race. On their site, the road is very curved, and Sunbi is on a fixed-gear bike, so it will be easier for him to bypass Taejin on all turns and ascents. Junsu agrees without a doubt, but he worries about how Minwoo will be able to cope with 2, and also with his injured leg. Minwoo replies that he doesn't know if Taejin will be the second of the riders, but he would like to beat him with such a leg. Junsu asks his friend to be careful in the race with these two and asks him to take care of himself. The guy at the start asks the first riders to prepare. A crowd of guys shout out the names of schools as support, and Rim checks the camera. As in the last race, the competition will begin as soon as the gear touches the ground. The presenter releases a metal object from his hands and the racers take off. Rim follows the participants. She tells the audience that both riders are racing at a speed of 43 kilometers per hour. Sangmo School has a blue sticker, Taeyong has a red one. Rim says Sangmo is ahead of Taeyong from the start. Viewers of the broadcast admire Hyun-min because he was able to overtake Junsu. Participants reach the first point. At the turn, Junsu approaches the enemy and he does not like it. Junsu drives up close to Hyun-min, and he doesn't understand why the guy doesn't try to overtake him. Hyun-min is under a lot of pressure. The more he tries, the stronger this suffocating feeling. Then the young man realizes that Junsu is using him for slipstream. This is a technique used to reduce aerodynamic drag in various types of racing, both motorcycle and bicycle. In bicycle racing, this is also called drafting. This technique makes it easy to ride behind the rider, avoiding the oncoming air resistance. Rim says that this is a great race performed by high school students. The viewers of the broadcast understood what Junsu wanted to do. They think it's a good decision, but even so it's very difficult to chase the opponent. Hyun-min is angry at himself for being able to fall for Junsu's trick. While the guy was thinking that he had to drive up the mountain in front of him, the elder leaves from behind him. Junsu thanks him for blocking the wind and switches the speed. Rim announces to subscribers that Taeyong is pulling ahead with a red sticker. In the blink of an eye, he bypasses the opponent on the rise. The young man increases the distance between the representative of the senior Sangmo, who was in the lead just a second ago. At the top of the climb are Kim Jae-wan from the Sangmo team and Minwoo from Taeyong. They hear an approaching moped and Minwoo, pulling the sword tighter, informs the opponent that he has gone and tells him to pull up. Jae-wan replies that it is not yet known who will arrive first. The guys turn around and see Junsu approaching. The young man attaches a sticker to Minwoo's hand and wishes good luck. Rim announces that the second contestant from the Taeyong school has entered the race. The guy who was sitting on the bench and watching the broadcast says that if Minwoo continues to move at this pace, but there is no point in watching further. The journalist says that the second rider from the senior Taeyong is rapidly gaining speed. Soon he will pass the third final point. The viewers of the stream are surprised at the speed at which Minwoo pedals. They understand that this race is likely to be won by the guys from Taeyong. Junsu sits down on a bench and drinks a cold drink to catch her breath. The young man hopes that Minwoo will finish the race without any adventures. The elder suddenly remembers the day when his friend injured his leg. Minwoo is rapidly gaining speed. He realized for himself that after being supported by Junsu, He has no right to lose. Taejin is waiting for a member of his team at the point. The guy who was standing with them says that Sangmo seems to be losing. Taejin is angry because they are happy that they will be kicked out of the team. Manhwa drives past the guys at high speed and Taejin starts to lose his temper. He gets angry at a member of his team and shouts at him to pedal harder. The guy on the bike barely pulls up closer and says that he can no longer move at this speed. Rim says that the Taeyongs have reached the finish line. Manhwa continues to increase the distance between the opponent and suddenly a cat appears in front of him. The young man is very scared of this, so he tries to brake sharply, but he fails, and he falls off the bike. Viewers of the broadcast are surprised by the fall and everyone understands that Sangmo is likely to win today. The journalist announces that due to the accident, the girl is forced to end the stream. Junsu puts on his helmet to go to the rescue, because as he thought, it was too much for him to go with a leg injury. Taejin approaches the scene of the accident and sees Manhwa lying on the ground. He rejoices in his luck and continues to move. Rim approaches the guy and asks about his condition, if he can get up. The young man ignores the girl's words, but suddenly they are approached by Jaehyun, who swears at Manhwa for falling apart on the roadway. Manhwa responds to Jaehyun to stop looking at him and go his own way. The president rips the sticker off Manhwa's hand and puts it on his own. He reports that he learned the rules en route from Junsu Sunbi. The young man wants to repay the debt to the elder Sangmo for that fight, so he tells Manhwa not to delude himself. Manhwa smiles and throws the helmet to a friend. Jaehyun catches the helmet and says it smells like Manhwa's sweat, so he doesn't want to put it on. The young man, hearing this, begins to get angry and says that his weekly socks smell better than Jaehyun, so he tells him to put on a helmet and go. Rim notices the president's bike and can't believe what she just saw. The joyful Taejin rides along the route and sings songs. He is happy that he is one step away from winning. Suddenly, he hears a strange sound behind him and, turning around, notices Jaehyun, who is driving at breakneck speed. The guy did not expect his appearance. The participants of the Taeyong did not say that the president would appear at the race. Taejin feels like he's being chased by a mad dog. The young man is extremely scared that the president is coming for him. Taejin remembers that there is only a descent ahead. It will be difficult for Jaehyun to go down the arc-shaped descent without brakes, so the guy thinks the president is crazy. If Taejin manages to cope with the descent, he will win. Therefore, the young man is determined to move forward. The guys drive up to the descent and suddenly a memory of the last accident pops up in Taejin's head. Meanwhile, Jaehyun overtakes his opponent and performs a 180-degree turn with skidding. Taejin tries to slow down to enter the turn, and at the same time watches the actions of the president. He doesn't understand how this guy decided to do this on the descent. Suddenly, the president brakes on the turn and turns to face Taejin. Fear appears on the bully's face. The guy is moving at high speed and shouts to Jaehyun to get out of the way. But the president is unperturbed. He continues to stand still. Taejin is already hysterically shouting at Jaehyun to get out of the way. The guy slams on the brakes with all his might, and he manages to stop right in front of the president. Beads of sweat are dripping from his face and he tries to catch his breath while Jaehyun stares at his opponent. Jaehyun starts talking about how Taejin kicked his bike last time. The guy doesn't understand what the president is talking about, but the young man continues. This magnificent carbon bike and Jaehyun's bike, which Taejin looks down on, calling junk. Therefore, the president suggests to see who will be the first to arrive at the finish line. Taejin replies that he will win anyway, even after that humiliation on the descent. Then the first one who crosses the finish line will be considered the winner. Jaehyun is also wondering how fast a carbon bike is. If Taejin loses to scrap metal, as he put it, on his lightweight, then he will need to blame not the bike, but the legs that pedal. The guys get on their bikes and start. Jaehyun goes first, and Taejin thinks that he can't lose now. Meanwhile, Manhwa returns to the start. Everyone starts asking him about what happened. The young man apologizes for the inconvenience. He must not have fully recovered from that accident. Rim says that after that fall at such a speed, it's a miracle that Manhwa got off with scratches and bruises. Taejin's friends start laughing at Manhwa and thanking him for the victory he gave them. Suddenly, the guys notice how someone with Taejin is approaching the finish line. Everyone sees a red sticker on his hand and does not understand where the Taeyongs got another participant. The crowd recognizes the winner as the president of the Taeyong school, who competed with Taejin last time. Cold water is brought to them, and the bully's friends say that the appearance of Jaehyun is against the rules. Jaehyun tells Taejin that he is the trough, not his bike. The young man offers the bully to compete again so that he learns to pedal. Taejin starts to boil, and the presenter stops him. The guy says that he doesn't understand why one of the Taeyongs suddenly entered the race. For someone not from their team within this race, it is unacceptable to interfere in their problems. The young man reminds Minwoo of his own words about the 3-on-2 race. There was no question of another scenario. The guy adds that the moment Minwoo fell off his bike, the race for the Taeyongs was over. Minwoo smiles and replies that he already understands everything, without his captain's explanations. The young man says that they will no longer complicate the situation. He rips the team logo off the sleeve of his jacket and says he's done with it. After making sure that there are no objections from the participants, Minwoo asks to take care of the team so that his soul is calm. Junsu puts her hand on her friend's shoulder and they leave. Minwoo apologizes to Sunbi for what happened, but the friend smiles and says that everything is fine, and he was on the team only for the sake of Minwoo. Leaving the team does not mean that they will not be able to ride anymore. Jaehyun calls Minwoo and throws his helmet into his hands. The victim catches him and thanks the president for today's race. The president ignores Minwoo's words and, putting a hood on his head, is about to leave. The journalist looks at Jaehyun's bike again and realizes that the guy inherited it. Taejin is sitting on a bench with his head down. He cannot rejoice at the victory despite the fact that it took place. His friends are standing around the guy and are going to have a drink in honor of the fact that the Taeyongs are over. A guy comes up to them and calls Taejin a viper. The guy abruptly rises from the bench and sees a red-haired guy named Hong Yoo-bin. This guy is from Chongpa High School. He is in his second year of study. Beads of sweat appear on Taejin's face, and his friends say that they have urgent business. Yoo-bin says that he saw today's online race, so he is interested in what's wrong with Minwoo's leg. One of the friends says that they won this race and kicked the Taeyongs out of the team. Yoo-bin, realizing that the team will fall apart without Minwoo, also leaves her. Taejin is angry because the guy has never taken part in the life of the team. Finally, Yoo-bin says that Minwoo is still as energetic when he watched his race. The guy realized that even a fracture would not stop him. Minwoo approaches his house and meets his father and his stepmother there. The parents approach the guy and the father, noticing an abrasion on his son's face, begins to ask him why he walks the streets instead of studying. The woman asks her husband to calm down and is going to bring her hand to Minwoo's face to examine the wound more closely. She says that the wound needs to be treated as soon as possible, otherwise a scar remains. The young man turns his face away and asks his stepmother to remove his dirty hands. Hearing this, the father becomes enraged and slaps his son in the face. The man is dissatisfied with the fact that the eldest child rides a bicycle instead of studying. Minwoo can't stand it and in an attempt to open his father's eyes, says that this woman only needs his money. Hearing about this, the father tells his son to give his wallet and all credit cards, because the young man spends all the money on useless bicycles and entertainment. The guy throws his wallet on the floor and says that he doesn't need his money. The father begins to get even more angry because of his son's antics. Yoonha heard the whole scandal of the family members. The girl is sitting on the bed and putting her head on her knees, starts crying and blaming herself for everything. Minwoo is sitting on a bench and flipping through the contact book to ask someone to spend the night. He has no money, he was kicked out of the team, he was kicked out of the house. The guy wonders that his whole life is a complete failure. The young man notices a family that was passing by him. He remembers his happy childhood. One day, the family was walking. Minwoo was telling his dad about the fact that he got the highest score on the tests, and the boy asked for a bicycle as a reward. The man gladly agrees, but with the condition that the boy will look after his sisters, Yoonha and Yoonmai. Mom called her son responsible, and Yoonha considered it nonsense. Then the family gathered at home and decided to eat something delicious. Plunged into memories, Minwoo begins to cry. Next to him, he hears the sound of a jar opening and, raising his head, sees Jaehyun. The guy sees tears on Minwoo's face and he decides that the guy is crying because of the loss. Minwoo begins to deny this assumption, and the president leaves. But remembering that he has nowhere to spend the night today, Minwoo decides to ask for help from Jaehyun. Hearing about this, the guy accelerates his pace. The guys reach Jaeheng's house and all the way Minwoo continued to beg the guy for a bed for the night. He said he didn't have any money at all and he promised it would only be for one night. The president remains adamant. He replies that these are the problems of a young man. Minwoo does not calm down and asks for help again. Jaehyun replies that he needs to study, so he sends the guy to his friends. Minwoo replies that he doesn't have any friends he could ask for it. The president replies that he is not the kind of friend that a young man can ask for a favor. He enters the territory of the house and closes the gate door in the face of Minwoo. It started raining outside. The young man is sitting on the ground and remembering his life. There were always those around him who didn't care what kind of person he was. Everyone liked only the status of a young man. People want to get close to him just because his father is the CEO of a large company. There were always fake smiles and thoughtful kindness on the faces of these people. Manhwa also always wears a false mask when communicating with people. His father always said that this is how you can survive in a world of falsehood and hypocrisy, and he always followed his words. Therefore, Manhwa lived by hiding his real self under a mask. He took it off once and was always alone. When he was younger, the young man discovered cycling, and only this became an outlet for him in his loneliness. The guy got carried away with racing and created a cycling club, gathered people who just loved to ride. But now even that has been taken away from him. Suddenly, the young man hears a cat meowing near him. He opens his eyes and sees the cat that prevented him from racing. But Manhwa sees no point in blaming the animal for what happened now. The guy noticed that the cat was limping, and after examining it, he saw a wound on the paw. Manhwa decides to give the cat something to eat, but there was only human food in his pocket. The guy fed the cat and realized that she could not dodge then because of the damaged paw. The young man takes the kitten in his arms and realizes that she is also alone. The cat meows in response. Woo Hyun returns home and sees a familiar guy in front of his house. He realizes that this is one of his older brother's friends who recently came to their house. The boy comes closer and sees a cat in the hands of a young man. He is already completely uninterested in what the guy says. All his attention is focused on the cat. Jahyun is sitting in his room and looking at the street where it's raining. The guy gets up from his chair, takes an umbrella and is about to go outside. But in the doorway he is met by Woo Hyun with a cat in his hands, who asks his brother where he is going. Behind Woo Hyun, the president sees Manhwa. The younger one says that he was soaked to the skin, so the boy could not pass by. The guy was happy because he thought that the child was talking about him, but the boy was talking about an animal. The child adds that he took Hyun with him because he was with the cat. Having explained everything, the boy rushes off and rushes to the bathroom to wash and heal the cat's wound. The guys look at each other and Manhwa says that he will leave as soon as the rain stops. Jahyun throws a towel at the guy and sends him to the shower. Woo Hyun asks his brother if it would be dangerous to leave this suspicious guy at home. Manhwa replies that he is not suspicious at all, and the boy agrees with his words, because the young man did not leave the cat in trouble. Manhwa comes out of the shower and feels like he's been reborn. The guy informs the brothers that he is hungry and is going to take something to eat from the refrigerator. At that moment, Jahyun's mom comes in and asks about the bike on the street, because she hadn't seen it before. The woman takes off her shoes and after going into the house notices Manhwa, who was standing without a t-shirt near the open refrigerator. The guy turns around at the voice and freezes. From fright he dropped a bag of cheese from his mouth. Manhwa, Jahyun, Woo Hyun and their mom are sitting at the table and having dinner. Mom ordered fried chicken to treat the guest. After learning that Manhwa's father is the CEO, Mom was surprised that Jahyun has such wonderful friends. The president denies the fact that they are friends. Mom smiles radiantly, and the boy reminds her of how she once told Hyun that friends are not needed. The woman takes a chicken leg in her hand and sends it into the mouth of her youngest son. Then Mom reminds him that he needs to eat and go do his homework. The woman leans over to Woo Hyun and tells him that the tests will start soon, so the boy does not have time to slowly chew fried chicken. Suddenly Mom hears meowing. The woman does not understand where the animal came from in their house, and the boy replies that it was Manhwa who brought the kitten. Woo Hyun, seeing the cat, gets up from his chair and runs to him, calling him Jack. Mom is trying to stay calm, so she says that Manhwa should pick up the cat when he leaves. Then the woman pays attention to the guys' faces. She asks them why their faces are in such a state. Jahyun decides to keep silent and starts drinking a drink, and Manhwa says that they had a conflict with guys from another school. Mom jumps up from her chair and asks who it was and what school they're from. Manhwa replies that these guys were out of uniform, so they don't know that. The woman tells them to be sure to tell her when they meet them next time. There is no need to get into a fight just like that. Manhwa reassures Mom, saying that this will not happen again. Jahyun gets up from his chair and is about to leave, but his mom stops him. She says that her son's grades have deteriorated badly, so if this continues, then no bike and walking. The president agrees with Mom's words and goes to his room. After a while, Manhwa comes to Jahyung's room and sees him sitting in the dark. But at least the guy has a mom. Even if she scolds him, Manhwa is still jealous of this. Jahyun approaches his friend and kicks him to get him out of bed. Manhwa replies that he can only sleep on the bed. He also promises not to do anything with him so they can sleep together. But the president didn't like this idea, so he made a bed for himself on the floor. Minwoo suddenly asks Jaehyun when he started skating, adding that he does it very well. As for Minwoo, as a child, while walking in the park, he saw a happy child riding a bicycle. He had seen it many times, and eventually became interested in cycling and started riding. Suddenly, Minwoo comes up with the idea of creating a team together because Jaehyun also likes to skate. The president replies that the guy talks too much. He asks him to stop talking nonsense and go to bed. The young man turns over on his other side and says that he will stay with Jaehyun for a few more days. The president jumps up, not understanding what he is talking about. Minwoo explains that his mom let him stay with them. A message from Yoonha arrives on Minwoo's phone. She asks her brother about why he is not at home. The guy replies that he spends the night at Jaehyung's. The girl is surprised by this. She does not understand how the president allowed her to stay with him. Minwoo then types a message asking his sister to bring his uniform and clothes in the morning. The girl asks to send the address and ask for forgiveness. The brother does not understand what she is apologizing for. Yoonha ignores his question and wishes her brother good night. In the morning, Minwoo wakes up to the aroma of food. The young man leaves the room and sees Jaehyun in an apron. After hearing that the guy woke up, the president says that mom left early in the morning. Minwoo starts laughing when he sees Jaehyung's apron. The guy starts jumping around the president and making fun of him in every possible way. Slightly calmed down, Minwoo sits down at the table and asks about Woo Hyun. Jaehyun replies that he is playing with Jack behind the house. Minwoo sees the dish that the president has prepared and, thinking that it is for him, says that the young man should not have tried so hard. But Jaehyun picks up a plate and passes by a friend. He says that this food is for a cat. After these words, Minwoo gets upset, because he is a guest and therefore asks what then he has to eat. Jaehyun replies that he should cook his own food. The director adjusts his tie, and there is a hair styling gel on the table. Suddenly, the phone rings, and the man begins to get angry because it's too early for calls. He picks up the phone and hears the voice of his granddaughter Sally. The girl reports that she is returning to Korea this weekend. After hearing this news, the man begins to rejoice and answers her that he is waiting for his granddaughter with impatience. Sally promises to call grandpa as soon as she arrives. Minwoo is sitting in the backyard of Jaehyung's house and fixing his bike. A car pulls up to the gate and honks in order to announce its appearance. The guy goes out to Yoonha and the girl, after examining her brother, says that he looks bad. Minwoo replies that he got caught in the rain yesterday, so he needs to repair the bike. The girl gives her brother a backpack with things and asks him to stop being stubborn and return home as soon as possible. Yoonha promises to talk to his father. Minwoo answers her so that she doesn't worry. He wants to deal with it himself. Yoonha changes the subject and asks how Minwoo managed to stay in this house. The girl also asks if Jaehyun treats his brother normally. Minwoo replies that it was the circumstances. Jaehyun is a bore, of course, but they manage to find a common language. The girl sighs and offers to take her brother to school by car. Minwoo refuses and says he will ride a bike. Yoonha gets into the car and tells his brother not to be late. Woo Hyun approaches Minwoo and asks if it's his girlfriend. The young man replies that this is his sister and says that such a horror story cannot be his girlfriend. Minwoo came to his senses when he realized who he was talking to. The boy replies that the guy can't have a girlfriend, since he stayed at their house. The young man begins to get angry, and the boy runs away, telling the cat to look behind the house. The guys are going to school and Minwoo approaches Jaehyun. He asks a friend if he will ride a bike to school. The president doesn't understand what Minwoo is talking about. Then he explains that he has no money, so he will go to school by bike and suggests that Jaehyun go together. The guys drive out onto the roadway and seeing what kind of bike path there is, Jaehyun suggests going to school through the park. Minwoo raises his hands up and enjoys the weather. He says that on such days you want to forget about school and just go for a ride. Minwoo turns his head to Jaehyun and notices the guy's lack of a helmet. Minwoo says that he is in debt to the young man, so he says that Big Brother will give it to him. But he remembers that his father took his money, so he won't be able to buy a helmet. The president asks Minwoo to shut up and hurry to school. Then Minwoo offers to drive a race. As always, there is noise in the school. The voices of students can be heard from all classes. Myung and Yoonha are chatting in the hallway. Minwoo's sister tells how her brother stayed the night at Jaehyung's house. Myung doesn't understand when the guys managed to become close friends. Yoonha replies that she doesn't know, but assumes that something happened between them. Yoonha changes the subject and says that there is a school board meeting this week, so she suggests a friend to hold it in a cafe. Myung agrees, but the question is whether Jaehyung will agree. The girlfriend replies that they will just put him in front of the fact, since most of the members are girls. Myung laughs and agrees with her classmate's words. Yoonha replies that it's all for Myung's sake, and adds that they will leave early after the meeting. Yoonha suddenly starts patting her friend on the head and asks how much longer she is going to hide it. The girl does not understand what her friend is talking about. Yoonha replies that Jaehyun turned out to be better than she thought of him. So if they succeed, Myung should treat her friend to something delicious. Han Nam approaches the girls with a radiant smile on his face. He says that he can't miss such an important meeting, so he asks Yoonha if he can join them. Girls don't understand what's going on with the guy. Yoonha replies that he is nobody to call him. Han Nam raises his hand and says that he will come as an assistant. The girl thinks that everything the guy said is nonsense, so she drives him away and sends him to bed. Han Nam does not intend to back down, so he offers the girl to watch a movie after the meeting. A zombie movie has recently been released. Yoonha refuses, explaining that she doesn't want to watch movies with staggering corpses. Therefore, the girl tells the guy to watch the movie with someone else. Myung, who was watching them, concluded that the two of them looked good together. Myung looks out the window and notices Minwoo and Jaehyun walking together. They both arrived on bicycles today. The girl notices that the weather is wonderful today and thinks about buying a bicycle. Yoonha replies that after the purchase, she will be able to ask Jaehyun to teach her how to ride. Han Nam intervenes in the conversation and says that he, too, will soon buy a bicycle. Minwoo appears in the hallway and all the girls start greeting him. Hulan is sitting in the classroom with his friend. They are looking at magazines with pictures of beautiful girls. A classmate with green hair approaches them and selects a magazine, asking what these abodes of knowledge are doing. Hulan's friend says that he did not have time to photograph everything to the end and asks to return the magazine. The girl begins to smile and suggests that the guys have a lot of complaints about the head of the school's morality committee. The guys were embarrassed and replied that there were no complaints. Suddenly, Hulan notices Minwoo, who brought a bicycle to class. The young man approaches him and asks why he did it. Minwoo told him that he could not leave such an expensive bike on the street, because it could be stolen. While Hulan was asking the young man about the cost of a bicycle, his friend was trying to take away a magazine from a classmate. When Minwoo calls the price, the two forget about the magazine, and Hulan freezes in shock. He does not believe that a bicycle can cost such a lot of money. Minwoo replies that at the moment the bike is the most expensive thing he has, so he can't just miss it. The guy doesn't even have any money right now. Hulan starts asking Minwoo to ride the bike once, but when he approaches the bike, he realizes that it is too low for him. Hulan gets upset and runs to a green-haired classmate to ask her for milk. The girl motherly hugs him and promises to buy a drink. Jaehyun leaves the classroom and meets Yoonha in the hallway. She smiles at him and greets the young man. Then she says that she wanted to ask something about the upcoming meeting. The president asks what Yoonha wants to know about. The girl replies that they have agreed that they will spend it this weekend in a nearby cafe to lift the mood. Therefore, Yoonha asks what Mr. President thinks about this. Jaehyun starts talking about how the school assembly is not entertainment. But the girl interrupts him and clarifies that they are going to a cafe this weekend. To prevent the president from objecting to this, Yoonha waves his hand, says that he will send the address later, and is in a hurry to escape as soon as possible. A happy Yoonha walks down the corridor, singing funny songs. Entering the classroom, she approaches her friend. Myung is sitting in the classroom, thinking about something. She holds a pen near her lips, engrossed in reading. Suddenly, Yoonha appears in front of her. The girl is glowing with happiness, and a radiant smile spreads on her face. The friend leans over to Myung and says that the mission is completed. Jaehyun will come to the meeting. Yoonha tells her friend to dress up properly for the meeting, and a blush appears on Myung's cheeks. This story begins with the screams of a fleeing guy who is looking at his phone. He screams that a huge insect was right in front of him. Then they start attacking him and the screen moves away. Someone is holding a phone in their hands and watching this video of what is happening, described earlier, asking if it is fake in front of him. University audience. Students sit together and discuss the video that the young man showed. There are a lot of such videos on YouTube. A friend answers the guy. Where in ordinary life could such a huge insect come from? One of the guys asked, hinting that life is not a webtoon. Another young man, after watching the video, thought that something was similar in size to a person, not a beetle, and asked his friends what they thought about it. One of the guys, continuing to look at the phone, thought about how nice it would be to have such wings, as if like some kind of insect hero. Another young man in front of him was laughing at what a friend was saying. Holding the phone, the young man asked what was wrong, and then another guy took his phone. It was Su Chang. He was looking at a classmate's phone and asking what was cool about insect wings. Wasn't it disgusting? Su Chang asked if the guys wanted to go with him. The girls offered to go for a drink. The guys were surprised to ask what the others wanted to drink because they had already gone yesterday, and the girls went to such events only for the sake of the friend who offered them. The young man had already started to give back, as one of the guys hugged him and said that they had not said anything against him. The other two bowed and were ready to join the event with joy. Su Chang was a rather intelligent and attractive youth who was aware of this. The young man had more than 5,000 followers on Instagram, and his school grades were always excellent. He was always invited by beautiful girls to alcoholic university parties. If we judge it all by the food chain, then our hero was its ruler, sitting at the very top. Perhaps some of you may think that these were infantile arguments of a young man. But a person, like an animal, lives in a group, and all creatures such as lions or ants have a similar joint lifestyle. They all have some sort of rank. Our hero is the object of getting other people who followed him around, so the young man decided that this could only mean that he was the strongest. He would never want to give up such a university life for anything. The young man stood next to our hero and asked if it would be okay if Su Chan went to drink with other girls. Our hero did not understand what his friend was driving at. Then he turned around and pointed his finger at the girl, shouting his name. Su Chang was called by a girl and waved her hand at him. It was a beautiful girl with pink hair named Mai He. She was interested in where the young man was going with a smile on his face. A friend took the young man by the shoulder and reminded him that they were the official couple of their faculty. Around the young man envied and at the same time said that the guys were not dating. The guys stood around the young man and talked with tears in their eyes, but so that the girls could not see. They asked Mai He if she would go for a drink too, and the girl wondered. Then the guys added that Su Chang was also coming, and it immediately excited her, the thought that she could have a drink with the young man. She rushed to Su Chang with the words that she would definitely go too. The friend who stood next to the hero thought that the girl would not refuse. Mai He ran at the young man with open arms, and it scared him. He felt some kind of discharge and pushed the girl's hands away. She was no less surprised by what had happened. The guys who saw the situation could not understand what was happening to their friend. The guy apologized to everyone and, saying that he was not very well, asked his friends to go without him. Su Chang left, and the guys didn't understand why he changed his mind so suddenly. Sometimes the young man abruptly left his friends, and they could not understand the reason. Su Chang apologized to the guys, saying that he overdid it yesterday at the Faculty of Traditional Korean Wrestling and also ran 5 more laps. The young men were surprised, because they did not seem to have such a struggle. Su Chang left and wondered what was wrong with him, why he said about the Faculty of Wrestling. His repertoire of excuses had outlived itself. The young man had one secret that no one knew about. Not far from the young man there was a sad guy, and the young man said that their positions with this guy were quite similar. This guy has also changed a lot since the beginning of the semester. They said that he was a guy who got along well with people. But now for some reason he has become a loner. The reason for all this was complex, is all because you showed people what you are ashamed of. The young man once went too far with a drink and suddenly an allergy appeared on his face. Whether it was from alcohol or from something else, but at that moment the young man saw the disgust on the faces of his classmates and ran away. After that incident, the guy lost confidence in himself and began to walk alone. It was all obvious that every person has something that he would like to hide from others, and telling someone about it was tantamount to showing his weak spot. At that moment, there was a house in front of the young man, and he went into the apartment. Why did our hero talk about this topic? Such as he, a handsome man and the soul of the company. Only now the young man who was standing in front of the mirror and began to take off his clothes, under which there were bandages, and after taking them off, you realized that he also had one complex. There were wings behind the guy's back. He recalled today at uni and the conversation about insects, when he said that it was all ugly and disgusting. This could not be beautiful. These wings that were behind his back were disgusting, the young man thought. The whole reason was that they were dragonfly wings. When our hero was in high school, he sprayed the room from dragonflies flying into the apartment, and suddenly they all turned into powder, after which the young man accidentally inhaled it, and then he was tormented by nausea, and he could not fall asleep. The next morning, when the young man looked at himself in the mirror, he saw wings appear on his back. Hiding under the table, he began to be overcome by various thoughts that people might consider him a monster, and if he was caught, they would put experiments on him. Living in this fear, he could not sleep properly. He tried in every way to hide his wings and keep his distance from others, because he didn't want anyone around to see his wings. The young man refused to go to karaoke and gatherings with friends, and so his life passed alone. No one found out about his secret, and he was able to focus on going to university. However, speaking of one drawback, it was worth mentioning that constant loneliness was damn painful for a guy. Therefore, after entering the university, the young man went to a barber shop and decided to change. At first, he sorted out the wings, which he rewound with bandages. It was a little uncomfortable, but he was able to solve this problem much easier than he thought. After that, he gained self-confidence, thanks to a confident, bright expression on his face, attention to his hairstyle and clothes, as well as politeness to everyone, so he was able to change dramatically. Self-confidence is the first condition for great beginnings, as they say, and as a result, to the surprise of the guy, people began to reach out to him. He was one of the first to ask the young man for his number. However, our hero believed that as soon as everyone saw his disgusting wings of his student life, the end would come. The young man wanted to go for a drink with Mai-hee, but for some reason, at this very moment, the wings always served as an obstacle for the young man. They seem to remind the young man that they are part of him. If he does not take off his clothes for a long time, then his muscles begin to numb, as if he had been sitting in one chair for a long time. For this reason, the young man had to leave abruptly, because he would not want anyone to see his wings, especially Mai-hee. With these thoughts, the young man spread his wings and decided to leave the shower with one towel around his neck. But then, opening her eyes, Mai-hee stood in front of him and looked at the guy in surprise. Frightened, both began to look at each other and shout, Mai-hee for the reason that the young man was without clothes, and our hero, because he did not expect to meet anyone at home, especially a girl. He immediately shut himself back in the bathroom and wondered about the girl's reaction, whether she noticed his wings or not, immediately deciding to ask her how she got to his house. The girl was embarrassed to say that the young man had the door open. Mai-hee was standing near the bathroom door holding a bag of food and drinks in her hands, because the guys offered to get together for a drink at Su Chang's and told the girl to come first by giving his address. Our hero was angry that none of the guys informed the young man and he got into such a situation because of this. The girl stood silently and looked at the door, after which she decided to ask the young man if he really left because he felt bad. The young man was surprised that she asked. Mai-hee talked about what was bothering her, because it wasn't the first time the young man had left everyone so abruptly and left. Sometimes, she said, he looked like he was in pain, and she asked a question that very upset and frightened the young man, whether he was hiding something. Standing in the bathroom, looking at the floor, he replied that he was not hiding anything from her. Mai-hee was silent, but after thinking about it, she put the package down and asked the young man to come out. He was surprised by her reaction. Then looking out from behind the door, he saw that Mai-hee sat down on the floor next to the bathroom and said that they should go to the cinema today. She would wait for him until he came out of the bathroom. The young man tried to dodge, saying that he felt bad. But the girl didn't believe him. She started talking about how it was clear that the guy was not ill, and that he was constantly alone thinking about something, as if he was hiding something. She was sad from all these thoughts, and she understood that the young man would not share his experiences with her. For her it was it's a shame. And Mai-hee reminded him of the story when a young man saved a girl from a student who was constantly following her. He, of course, remembered this. Then the girl told him that at that moment it looked selfishly ridiculous, and she did not understand why he got into someone else's business. But nevertheless she was very grateful to the young man, and if he did not hate her, then she would also like to get into someone else's business. She told the young man that he could turn to her for help and talk if something was bothering him. The guy was standing outside the door and looking at the ceiling, mentally thanked Mai-hee for what a wonderful person she was and dressed and left, saying that they had to go to the cinema. But at the same time, the young man understood that he could not show the girl anything, even if she was so understanding and kind. And maybe it was the right decision. Going to the cinema for them, someone was watching, someone who looked like a mantis and smelled the feed. Arriving at the cinema, the young man tried to stop Mai-hee, who was ready to help everyone and participate in surveys from students. The girl was too kind and could not refuse those who asked her for something. Smiling, the girl showed that she was given a candy, from which she was happy, while she looked so beautiful that our hero was embarrassed. The young man's head was visited by the thought that if he and Mai-hee started dating. The guy was thinking about it when, sitting in the cinema, the girl, frightened, clung to him, and then decided to go to the toilet, spilling something from a glass on her jacket. The young man thought that someday he would have to tell her about his wings, and if she sees him like this, will Mai-hee continue to treat our hero as before? Then he decided that she would be scared. He couldn't admit to anyone that he was a monster. And I decided that now everything can go on as usual. Sitting in the cinema, suddenly everyone saw that the screen and the lights turned off. Something was wrong with the electricity and everyone was dissatisfied with what the action in the cinema ended. But then suddenly a young man who ran into the hall shouted about evacuation and asked everyone to leave the cinema right away. He shouted about a suspicious object that was in the building and at the same time had a weapon with him. Someone thought it was an event. But the young man dispelled their doubts, saying that it was an evacuation and everyone had to follow his instructions. But suddenly he froze and could no longer say anything. The same object that the guy had talked about earlier appeared from behind and dealt with the young man. Everyone, seeing the picture that happened in front of them, began to flee. Our hero did not understand what was happening. He looked at the fact that a man had just been killed in front of him and could not believe it. The hero realized that it was dangerous in the cinema and had to get out, but Mai-he was still in the building. While everyone was running away, the monster saw our hero, knowing that he was looking for him and jumping next to the young man broke all the chairs in the cinema. The young man fell to the floor and looking at the hands of the monster that was in front of him, could not believe his eyes. His hands were not hands. And they heard each other. The young man asked what that monster was doing, then grinning. The monster realized that the young man had seen an insect man for the first time besides himself. Then the villain decided to ask and confirm his idea that the young man, like him, also drank an insect repellent called jungle juice. The young man looked at the monster in horror and did not understand what kind of jungle juice he was talking about. But then memories surfaced before him of the moment when in high school he sprayed the class with insect repellent, and if the monster was talking about it, then it simply could not be. The monster continued to say that after he became like this, he began to smell some kind of smell. It was a very appetizing aroma. Running away from the monster, the young man tried to hide, but he ran after him, telling him what a great smell he felt from the young man and that he really wanted to eat him. And starting his attack, the monster was hit by something heavy from Mai-he, who appeared in time in front of Su Chang. The young man lying on the floor was very surprised to see the girl. She was scared to say that when she came out of the toilet she could not find the young man. The monster looked at the girl and thought about how brave she was. The monster started attacking the girl. The guy asked her to run away from here, because it was dangerous here, but he was at a sufficient distance from the girl to do something, and the monster was already next to her. At that time, the territory was already cordoned off on the street and no one was allowed to go inside the building, because an unknown person in the building staged terror with weapons. The girl was arguing with the policeman, because there were still people in the building. She told the policeman that she would go on her own if they did not take the necessary measures. At that moment, the young man shouted that there was a man upstairs. It was Mai-he who fell out of the window of the building. The monster threw the girl out of the window, and the guy who did not have time to save her was terrified about what to do. How to save Mai-he if he had never used wings and had never flown. Moreover, he saw a group of people standing below and could see his wings, then his life. His usual life would end. He apologized to the girl, mentally saying that he could not save her. But at the same moment, feelings and reaction took over, and our hero was already jumping after the girl. The monster that threw the girl out of the building believed that the young man could not survive, because an insect man, falling from such a height, would die, while thinking what a coward like this guy would do in such a situation. The young man looked in front of him, hugging the girl to him and thought that everyone would look at him now. He didn't know if he would lose his life now, but remembering Mai-he, who said she was ready to help him, he decided that it was the right decision. And his wings burst out. Each person had something that he wanted to hide from others, and to tell about it was tantamount to showing his weakness. With these thoughts, our hero descended into the crowd of people photographing him. This is the story of a tough survival, a student who suddenly became weak after falling into the stone jungle of natural selection. There were wings in the very center of the city. Looking at all this, the girl said that she had previously wanted to break into the building. She was very surprised and she reported on the transmitter that, in her opinion, the young man did not need to be exterminated. He had to be taken to school like herself. Taking off her cap, she was looking at the guy, and a long mustache was sticking out of her head. Everyone was trying to figure out what had happened. Someone saw that the young man saved the girl who fell from the window of the building. All the cameras were pointed at the two of them at the moment when the young man descended with Mai-he from the sky. The monster realized that the young man was hiding his wings, and the strangest thing was that the young man was hovering in one place. Our hero was looking at Mai-he, who was on his hands and saw blood, but the girl did not answer him. She fainted. The monster was thinking about what the young man was capable of. Our hero was getting used to it, even though it was his first flight. The monster wanted to stop the young man, but realized that in front of him was the only creature capable of flying like that, and it was a dragonfly. The young man received dragonfly DNA by taking jungle juice. Su Chang flew over the city wanting to find the nearest hospital, and the monster, looking after them and licking his lips, thought that he felt like he wanted to eat this dragonfly. The same girl was waiting for him from behind. After dealing with him, she asked if this monster knew what he had done. The girl recalled a previously uploaded video on YouTube, which was clearly not enough for the monster, so he also decided to arrange a performance in the city center. He probably really wanted to be caught. The girl, wearing a cap and hiding her mustache, looked at the monster that lay in front of her and told him that the world should not have known about their existence. At that moment, our hero flew to the hospital at full speed to save the girl who was unconscious. A month later, everyone was discussing the video that was uploaded to the internet. Su Chang's friends were also looking at what had happened. The incident in the cinemas interested everyone. Looking at the screen, she saw a guy with wings on his back, which very much resembled the wings of a dragonfly. Everyone wondered how a person could have such, maybe he was a monster. And one of the students said that no matter how much he watched this video, the guy looked more like Su Chan. All the young men at this moment were looking at the naked hero, who was hiding in a hood. After all, on that day, news about what happened spread all over the internet and, of course, they reached the university in a moment. The young man believed that then he would really be caught and sent for experiments. Many people treated this situation as a fiction. The news said that it might have been an event from the university. But all this was repeated again with our main character, and he remembered his childhood 12 years ago. Then all the children, sitting at the table, congratulated the child on his birthday. Everyone was happy and smiling. The little hero then stood aside, looking at how everyone was having fun. Then the teacher offered to call Su Chan, to which everyone was unhappy with the offer, because the children were not close to him and Su Chan never even brought gifts to anyone. One of the girls said, and everything was because the boy had neither money nor parents. In those days of his childhood, the boy also wanted to make friends with the others. But when you are very different from others, it is impossible to rejoice in such happiness, our hero believed. He did not understand why he was always different from others. Thinking about it, the young man was walking home, but then a guy crept up behind him and decided to lift up his raincoat. The young man immediately reacted and almost hit the guy on the head. He managed to dodge and say that he wanted to check if the young man had wings. The guy went towards his friends. They asked if he had checked the wings or not. He was almost sure that it was our hero who was on all the videos on the internet. The company started discussing this point. Su Chang didn't like that they looked at him like an animal in a zoo, and just a month ago they were friends. And the young man often went to university with them. And now that Su Chang, who was close to them, was no longer there, our hero was walking completely alone and everyone was looking at him with a disapproving look. Passing by and discussing him in a whisper, the young man felt lonely and thought that it would be better if he was passed for experiments. After getting on the bus, he decided to check his social networks, saw that many had unsubscribed. Then he remembered that there were rumors that the experimental laboratory was investigating the case of that monster on the video. And the young man would not want to be involved in this in any way. But he didn't care how many people turned away from him as long as he had Mai-He. The young man found out the news that Mai-He had regained consciousness this afternoon and decided to check on her. He just needed her. After coming to the hospital, Mai-He saw the young man. With a frightened look, tried to get out of bed and hide from him as far as possible, telling the young man not to approach her. Su Chang was annoyed and surprised by the girl's behavior and wanted to find out what happened. The girl tried to hide away from him, but the guy kept shouting at her. The nurses held the young man so that he would not approach the girl. Mai-He, who was so kind to our hero, who was worried about him, terrified, asked the young man not to approach her anymore, calling the young man a monster. The guy was put out the door of the ward, and he was so upset that when he came home he just decided to get rid of his wings. Picking up a pair of scissors and biting a towel, he decided that he would cut the wings. Only when he brought the scissors to the wings, he dropped them on the floor and began to cry sitting on the floor. He knew that it would hurt, but he could not hold back his tears, which had accumulated from all the insults and suffering. He thought he was so pathetic. A month later, the young man walked past random passers-by who were chatting merrily about life, thinking that a person lives in a group and, of course, there was someone who got out of this collective. Many of these people chose one end for themselves and the young man went to the roof of the building to ease his suffering, deciding that it would make him feel better. He jumped down, but then the wings saved him, which upset the young man very much, and then he saw a girl in front of him who spoke of envy for his wings, because she would like the same. The young man looked at the girl who was standing right in front of him. He did not know who she was or how long she had been standing here. More importantly, he didn't understand how she was standing on the wall. The girl continued to ask questions about the wings, asking why he decided to do it, having such wings, because it was very stupid. Taking off her cap and showing her true self, she told the young man that there was a way to become an ordinary person again. And the young man looked at her in surprise, considering whether there really was such a way to become a man again. Then he saw her mustache, she was the same as himself. Then the girl offered to go inside to talk, because she was very cold. Going inside, our hero began to ask how he could become a man again. A new acquaintance looked at him point blank, saying that she had a condition. She offered to go to her university for an interview. There will be a professor who will explain everything to the young man himself. Our hero looked dumbfounded at the girl, replaying in his head her words about the professor, and the interview to which he should go to get an answer to his question. The girl said that if the young man follows her, then they will take the bus that was waiting below to the university, where the young man will meet with the professor. The young man incredulously asked the girl why he had to believe her, because he had already been almost eaten by a mantis once. She suggested that he do what he had tried to do before, since he did not believe her. Looking at the young man, the girl explained to him that if he followed her and trusted her, then he would never be alone again. All the moments of his life, when he felt lonely every time, surfaced in the young man's head. And this phrase hooked the young man. Pursing his lips, he decided to take this step and agreed with the stranger, because he had nowhere else to go. After getting on the bus, the girl began to ask our hero, showing him the bottle, whether he knew this insect repellent that she had in her hands. He looked at the bottle in surprise and saw the very remedy that was called jungle juice. This is a tool that has mixed the DNA of an insect and a human. At one time, a new acquaintance of our hero told us this remedy was very popular because of its effect. But the problem was that if you kill an insect, its DNA will get into your body. It is for this reason that a part of the young man's body, the same as that of the mantis, became part of the insect. The young man tried to find out who invented this remedy by asking the girl a question. But she herself did not know, neither the name of the company was known, nor what kind of person invented this remedy. It was only known that a large number of people were infected from it. Having scored information on the internet, the young man could not find anything. The search query did not show results. The girl had one answer to this. She also looked into the phone and told the young man that nothing was known because people like her had covered their tracks. Our hero looked at her uncomprehendingly. Then the girl got up and said that they had arrived. When he got off the bus, he did not understand where his new companion had brought him, because they were still standing in the tunnel. The girl went to the dashboard that read information from her phone and asked the guy, while the doors were opening, if he knew where the tunnels were. The young man, of course, knew. The tunnels were in the mountains, and then the door opened in front of him, and a bright light shone in his face. His companion told him that people like her try to avoid people, so they live in hiding all the time. And the campus is located in Nesta, and a magnificent view of the city opened up before the young man. The young man walked and talked with surprise about the university that was inside the mountain, and then he saw people, and the whole picture looked like a real jungle with a variety of different species. The young man could not believe that there were so many like him. Could our hero really feel like an ordinary person in this place? From above, walking along the corridor in chains, led a monster that saw the very dragonfly that it tried to catch earlier. The guards did not allow him to stop, and then the discharge was applied. From that moment the mantis was just a guinea pig. But he only thought about the dragonfly, which he could meet again. Various insect people flew over the hero's head. But the young man continued to be surprised at this place. He looked around at the people around him and then guessed that everyone here was the same as him. The girl confirmed his guess that everyone here was just as affected by the jungle juice as he was. The weather was wonderful and everyone was sitting outside enjoying it and drinking various drinks. Someone was flying in the air, and someone was just sitting in a coffee shop like an ordinary person. Although the place was called a university, in fact it was only an opportunity to protect such people. The young man was surprised how many of them there were, and his companion confirmed earlier words that the young man would not be alone here. His new companion suggested that the young man take a walk while she reported to the department about him and returned back, because our hero was the only new student this semester. The young man stood in the middle of the road and watched a new acquaintance leaving, while the same insect people passed by around him and lived their normal lives. Deciding to explore the nest, the young man went for a walk. He could not have imagined that such a fantastic university could be located in Korea. There was a wonderful forest around him and there were people of all ages in it. Someone was swimming in the river, someone was sitting on a tree, and someone was flying. Everyone was so different. Passing by, the young man looked at people, because they all had insect parts, like himself, and the most important thing was that people did not hide it. Passing by, the young man saw a beetle in front of him, and then a man who was meditating under the arch. The man told the young man that he gave the beetles honey, and in return they provided him with protein. Such was the circle of life, and with these words the man covered with beetles took and ate the beetle. The guy was trying to figure out who this man was and wondered about himself. He realized that there were no normal people here, and as soon as he moved away from the man, he looked under his cloak trying to find out what kind of beetle the young man was. He saw wings like a dragonfly. He immediately flew away. The man who had previously eaten beetles managed to examine the wings of the young man and considered them flexible enough to hide them under clothes and not break. He praised the young man's wings, saying that they were in great shape. Our hero looked at the man in horror, and he tried to understand why the young man was trying to hide them. Remembering the frightened Mai, he informed the man that he had come here to get rid of his wings. The man considered him a pathetic fool. Entering the university building, the young man introduced himself to Professor Ma Du-hyun, about whom his new acquaintance told him. The man held out his hand to the young man and thanked the girl named Hee-jin for bringing this student here. The professor admitted that he had heard about the young man from reports. The guy stared at the professor with all his eyes and thought that he had a way to become a human again. Ma Du-hyun suggested that the young man get straight to the point. He decided to tell the young man how to become an ordinary person again. And to begin with, I suggested Su-chan to watch the video. The young man was surprised at how quickly events unfolded, while the professor included a video from the graduation of this university. The speech of the class representative was on the screen, and then the best graduate started the Cinderella ceremony. An insect man was standing on the stage and his head was completely from an insect. He was holding a drink in his hand, after which he was pierced by a means by launching a proboscis into the drink and his hands appeared. And then his head. There was a beautiful girl on the screen that transformed. The young man, looking at the screen, asked the professor what was the remedy that she drank. The professor explained to the young man that this is what the university's research department accidentally created by exploring the jungle juice. They used the basic principle of jungle sap and separated the insect DNA. Speaking in ordinary words, the professor explained that the medicine he held in his hand was able to return people to their normal human state. They called him Cinderella. On stage, the girl was crying, rejoicing in her appearance, and the guy was trying to realize what he had heard. The young man realized that it was the same medicine and asked the professor to give him the medicine, because it was what our hero needed. The professor hid the bottle behind his back and told the young man that he could not just give it to him. The young man was surprised by such a reaction. Then the professor explained to him that Cinderella was not a medicine that could be easily prepared. It was made from jungle juice concentrate, so the amount that could be cooked was limited. Unfortunately, it was impossible to return everyone to normal life. The young man began to get angry, looking at the professor who was telling him all this. But then he told the young man that if he wanted to return to normal life so much, then he needed to go to university and finish it with the best result in the department. In the video, a happy student waved to everyone and smiled. The professor explained that only the best students received Cinderella, and I asked our hero what he would choose. The young man looked at the professor and thought about how to get medicine. He had to go to this university and what kind of university it was. After he left the building, Hee-jin asked Su-chang what he would do. The young man replied that since the medicine was given only to the best student, then, in fact, he had no choice but to act. The girl replied to the young man that the choice was always his, and if he did not want to enroll, he could just stay and live here. It was not bad here. Besides, even if he enters, it's not a fact that he will become the best student, Hee-jin said. The young man was glad that the question was not about money if it was only about learning. While taking out his case from his pocket, our hero said that everything was possible, and putting on the glasses that he had taken out earlier, said Su-chang, and even now he was ready to transfer to university. A few hours later, at the entrance to the lecture hall, the students were sitting in front of the university and discussing today, because today was the day of admission. They were discussing who would attend whose lectures this semester. Professor Ma's lectures, as always, were the most popular. One of the sitting students said that he failed his grades last semester. Then the girl replied that he needed to choose his professors more carefully. Our hero thought that he was transferred to this university very quickly, and this place was more like a university than the young man initially thought. He stood with the booklet and looked at what was happening around. All the insect people talked like university students, and the young man remembered Hee-jin, who helped him a lot. He remembered standing next to her and learning that enrollment was coming soon. He didn't even know which course to choose. The girl looked at him and said that he didn't even know what he was going to study and still talked about becoming the best student at the department. The young man panicked, and then she gave our hero a booklet where the main courses were painted. When enrolling, he had to choose one of the 3 that were described in the booklet. The guy looked at the booklet and thought about the courses, which of the 3 he had to choose. Looking at the names, he did not understand at all why they were so strange and thought that the girl had given him the wrong notebook. And he saw the name of the course, which sounded like the Principles of Nesta's Protection. It was the only good course in which more than half of the class were excellent students. The course was taught by Professor Ma, and the young man remembered a man who made a really good impression. After closing the booklet that Jin had given him earlier, he firmly decided. The hero decided that he would apply for Professor Ma's course. However, if you think about it, then all applicants had to get together and pass the entrance exams. He recalled that usually students used a computer in a cafe, but maybe there were good computers at this university. Then his thoughts were interrupted by a girl who rushed past. Our hero looked to the side and saw a girl with a young man who clearly wanted to fight. The girl told the young man she was sitting on top of that she didn't want to see him at the university anymore. The young man did not understand how the students began to fight out of the blue. The young man lying on the ground asked the girl why she got into a fight with him. To come to the university and fight. Probably it was the hostages of the university, which the hero only heard about. But the person passing by said that the young man was not afraid, because he would often have to watch this. She grabbed the girl and the boy and separated them on different sides. But the hero remembered these antennas. The young man who was lying on the ground wanted to find out who threw him away. The girl said that to start a new semester with a fight, so the energy was going forward. In front of the young man was Jin, representative of the Department of Insect Advantages Park Jin. The young man, who was looking at his new acquaintance, only now found out about the title of the girl that she held at this university, and he realized that he was now in the same department with someone like Jin. The girl waved her hand at him and asked him to go to the entrance exams. The guy began to worry about his student life. The time remaining before the entrance exams was 10 minutes, and our hero arrived on time. He sat down in the audience, taking his place at the computer. Almost everyone was already in their seats. A couple of guys were sitting behind him, who had fought on the street before, and our hero thought that his chance for an ordinary student life was already broken. But now it was the main thing for the young man to pass the entrance test. He was focused and looking at his computer. No matter how well someone grasps the material, if you allocate your time incorrectly or skip a good course, you will not be lucky in your studies. And our hero decided that no matter how, he had to get into Professor Ma's class. There was information about the professor's course on the screen. The professor stood and watched the city from his panoramic window. Then they came to him. In front of him was Professor Jai, a man of impressive size, full-time Professor Ji John. He was asking the professor about a new student. The professor remembered about Su Chang's student and asked what Professor Jin thought about him, because he had already met him before, and whether the young man will be able to finish the entrance exam normally. The professor thought about it and remembered the scene in the forest, his first acquaintance with the young man, when he told him why he came to the university. Sighing, Jin informed Professor Ma that the guy had no chance. At that moment, our hero was looking at the computer screen and seeing the inscription exam begins. All the students rushed out the window. The young man did not understand where everyone ran. But only then did he realize that this was the entrance exam. It was necessary to think carefully and win. The only winners will be the strongest. Our hero, looking out the window, did not understand where everyone ran. At that moment, everyone was already flying, running using their abilities. The entrance exam has begun. The young man did not understand what was happening. There was another student in the class who asked the young man if he had transferred recently. The guy told our hero that he apparently did not have time to listen to the explanations for the exam. The young man turned to the student, who decided to explain to our hero if he didn't mind. The task of the exam is to find a professor. The guy went on to explain that in this university, unlike others, they had to find a professor who was hiding somewhere in the forest. Only after that the student could be enrolled in the class. The professor will give the first 16 students a flash drive, and only when this flash drive is delivered to the computer in the classroom, then the student will be accepted. The young men were walking through the forest. Su Chang realized that they didn't have time to chat. And then his new friend asked the young man whose course he would like to enroll in. Our hero replied that he would like to get into Professor Ma's course, because he had heard that he gives the best grades at the university. And the goal of our hero was to become the best student in the department. The young man looked at Su Chang and said that it would be difficult to achieve, but he was impressed by the guy's aspiration. And after saying goodbye to our hero, the guy went to look for the professor and wished good luck on the exam. The young man also thanked the guy for the information and said goodbye. In his heart, our hero thought he was a good kid. Standing on the hill, the young man reflected that a lot of time had already passed, and he had to find the professor, whether he was already late. He would at least like to know in which direction the others went. And I decided to walk around and see if he could look around from some hill, so our hero needed to find a hill. Then he remembered his wings and hung his cloak on a tree and soared into the air high above the trees. Now the young man saw everything and even saw where the other students were going. Then he noticed the flags and thought that maybe the flags marked the places where the students needed to go. If what the young man thought was true, then the professors should have been at these flags. After looking carefully, our hero saw that all the students were fighting among themselves because of Professor Ma's lectures. It seemed too much to the young man to go so far for the sake of lectures. And having decided that it was necessary to get away from there, the young man looked at the flags again. He was sure that the flags were the destination points. The only question left was which flag Professor Ma was near and whether it was worth relying on luck. But then he decided that he needed to go there and flew to the flag. Point was the one where the professor was sitting and drinking his tea while reading a book. Then he was surprised and saw the fallen student Su Chang in front of him. The young man thought that his landing was tough. At the speed that he was flying, it was impossible to fly with his eyes open. But his guess was correct. All the students were heading to point B, but the truth was that there was a great demand for a good professor, so the current to which the bulk of people were moving would be needed, so our hero thought. And his delay at the beginning of the exam helped to reveal the full advantage of the dragonfly's flight speed. The professor gave the student Su Chang a flash drive. This is a flash drive required for enrollment in the class. The young man barely managed it was the last flash drive, but he was happy. All that our hero had to do now was to return to the classroom and insert the USB stick into the computer. The professor wished him good luck and be careful. The young man began to rejoice that he passed the exam even too well and took his first step. The professor informed everyone that the principles of Nesta protection had already ended. The young man, rejoicing that he had received a flash drive, thought that this was his first step towards becoming an ordinary person. The professor was looking at his phone. Now that he had given away all the flash drives, it was time to start and he pressed the button. Then our hero received an SMS. There was a list in which there were photos. The young man did not understand at first what it meant. The word goals was indicated in the message and he saw his photo. Professor Jin was lying in a hammock, and when he saw the message, he looked that a new student who had received a flash drive was on the list. He should have understood by now, Professor Jin reasoned out loud. Jin also saw a notification that a new student had received Professor Ma's flash drive. And now, as all the notifications have been received, everything has started. The exam was not finished and the hunt began for the young man. The first attacker from whom our hero managed to dodge was a barbel beetle. He was strong enough to destroy a tree. The young man did not understand why everyone started a fight, but everyone wanted to get a flash drive. The next young man was attacked by a flagellated spider, which hunted using its hands, whips growing from its back. The young man was surprised that all the guys tried to kill him because of some flash drive. Everyone tried to catch the young man, who deftly ran away from his opponents. Now the young man understood what was meant by the goal when he saw his photo on the screen. Why was this entrance exam so terrible? Our hero reasoned, running away from another opponent. Then he was called. A voice called here, and the young man saw a student who helped him at the very beginning of the journey, telling him about the exam. The guy was sitting in a tree and waiting for the young man. Everyone was running in pursuit of our hero. Hiding in a tree, the young man said that everyone had left. Our hero, trying to catch his breath, thanked the young man for helping him, calling the guy very kind. The young man, scratching his forehead, said that what Su Chang was telling him was unheard of nonsense and paralyzed our hero in the forehead with his claw. Su Chang stops obeying his body, and he falls to his knees. Unable to move, the young man unclenches his hand and takes the flash drive, explaining in parallel to the hero that it was the poison of a honey bee, a bee capable of secreting a small amount of strong poison, paralyzing the enemy's body. For some time, our hero, according to his opponent, will not be able to move. Standing in front of Su Chang, the young man himself did not believe that he now had Professor Ma's flash drive. It was really profitable to pretend to be a good man. Our hero looked in horror at the young man, and he asked the guy if he really thought that the bee was going to help him, because everyone here was rivals and no one would help their opponent, forcing students to fight so that only the strongest remain in the end. Didn't the young man know that this is the essence of the entrance exam? The bee asked him. Our hero looked at him with a trembling look. The young man, taking the flash drive from the hero, said that he would make sure that it would serve him well, and wished our hero to try harder next year, although he believed that he would never become a better student. With these words he flew away. The hero thought that he would not become the best if the guy eventually steals his flash drive, and pulling the claw out of his forehead, he decided that he must definitely get his flash drive back, otherwise he would not become the best student and not turn back into a person. With these thoughts he chased the guy, teasing him. He flew away from the young man, saying that if he tried so hard, the poison would spread faster. The young man with all his heart wanted to catch up with his opponent, reaching out to him with his hand. Then his eyes lit up like a dragonfly with a bright green light, and he began to see the movements of the bee and predict where he would be. The dragonfly, called the queen of the hunt, has a 95% success rate, and the secret of this success lies in her eyes. Having a faceted structure, dragonfly eyes are made up of thousands of individual eyes. These 1,000 eyes are able to catch the slightest movements within a radius of 360 degrees. Thanks to their amazing eyes, dragonflies read the movements of the victim and predict its trajectory during the hunt. The moment Su Chang thought, "I want to catch up with him," this young man became a victim. Not expecting that our hero would chase him, the guy got scared and got hit by a young man. 1,000 dragonfly eyes will never lose sight of a victim. Inserting a USB flash drive on the computer, the inscription "enrollment in the class is completed" appeared. Jin exhaled. She was done, and she was still wondering how much time was left before the end of the exam. Then a young man turned to her, who had been fighting with a girl in the morning, and decided to ask the representative of the department what was wrong with the guy she brought, whether everything would be fine with him. After all, she understood that there were many people who wanted to get into Professor Ma's course. Besides, if you don't meet the deadline, you automatically fail the entrance exam. Jin thought about the young man. If he really is going to become the best student in the department, then the young man will have to protect the flash drive at the cost of his life. The flash drive at the moment of impact fell out of the hands of the young men who were fighting in the air, and our hero tried to catch it. Almost reaching for the flash drive, suddenly another hand grabbed it. The girl who grabbed the flash drive thanked our hero for the gift, and with the words that the flash drive was useful to her, flew away from the guy. He wanted to fly after her in bewilderment, but realized that something was wrong with the bee. Looking at the young man, our hero did not understand why he still continued to fall, because he could have crashed by falling from such a height. In all likelihood, the bee guy passed out with a single blow that our hero inflicted on him. The young man, looking in the direction of the fleeing girl, understood that he could miss his flash drive, but his thoughts were busy with the falling guy. It was not the hero's fault that the young man brought this upon himself. But saving the guy, Su Chang could not pretend that he did not see anything, as a man, and our hero flew after the girl with his flash drive. Leaving the young man on the tree, he did not realize that he had missed the thief. He was finished. Flying through the air with dizziness, the young man thought about what he should do. He had to find another flash drive. And then he fell right into a tree, and then to the ground. His body did not obey him, and perhaps it was because of the poison. He hoped that he would not die, but to come to this because of the entrance exams. Then his thoughts got confused and he blacked out. When he regained consciousness, he heard a familiar voice. Professor Jin was standing and eating something next to the guy, calling the picture a pathetic sight. The professor told the young man to get up. He stood up in horror, thinking only about how long he had been unconscious. In front of him was that recent guy whom the young man remembered from the forest. Leaving this guy said that it was time for the young man to go. The entrance exam was over. The young man sat on the ground in complete disappointment. But then the man said that there were still 5 minutes left, but there shouldn't have been a single flash drive left. Sadly, the young man will have to postpone his goal until next year, although there was no guarantee that Cinderella would not end by that time. Here our hero asked the man to stop, saying that he was attacked surreptitiously, and the flash drive was taken away, and then he lost consciousness because of the poison. Weren't all these moments cheating? Calling the young man pathetic, the professor asked if there was anything in his head besides sawdust. He thought that the teachers should have made an exception for the young man and allowed him to retake. In this university, the most important thing was to be strong. If a young man had a goal, then he should fight for it until victory. The professor also explained that all the teachers monitored the process and stopped everything that could threaten the lives of students. Jungle sap turns people into weapons, poison, horns, when insects and claws are full of dangers. Could the young man really think that in an institute full of dangerous people he would be asked to read books in class here? If the young man wanted to read books, then he had to go to the Nesta Civil Protection Center. After all, if he stays there, he will be able to live quietly and peacefully, the life of a bug man. Then the professor threw the young man a candy wrapper from the cookies that he had eaten earlier, and asked the young man hanging around to throw away on the way. The professor asked the young man to take care of the planet and not forget to sort the garbage. The young man stood in the middle of the forest and thought that maybe everything was over for him. As a result, he did not go anywhere, remembering the situation with the young man, whom he could then leave to die. Then perhaps he could pass. The young man reproached himself for sitting here in the forest and thinking about such things. He considered himself a real trash, but then he remembered the professor's words about sorting garbage and decided to unwrap the wrapper that Jin had given him. The young man was so upset because he did not enroll, and the professor still gave him such tasks. Unwrapping the wrapper, he saw the treasured flash drive. And then I remembered the words of the teacher about the remaining 5 minutes. It was getting dark, and Professor Ma met Professor Geo. He did not believe that the professor could give the flash drive just like that, because it seemed to him that student Su Chang annoyed him. But maybe Professor Geo had a good reason. At that moment the professor recalled how the young man saved a falling bee guy, and Ma replied that he had chosen Su Chang as a whipping boy. Our hero at that time was trying his best to get to the office. He had almost no time left, and at such a speed he was only losing it. His eyes hurt from the air, but if he closed them, he would not be able to land normally, so he could not fly faster. But then he stopped and remembered about his glasses. Thanks to them, dust and wind will get into his eyes less. He was able to increase the speed. In the forest, the young man sat and reasoned that he did not understand why everyone was rushing through the forest. If it was possible to take away the flash drive right in front of the university and quickly enroll, the guys who were next to him supported their partner in their thoughts. And the team saw the guy right ahead. All their waiting finally paid off. And as soon as they rushed after the young man, as he, having overtaken them, flew on. The company tried to understand why the young man was so fast. They decided to run to the audience and take away the flash drive there. The girl running next to him told her partner that it was already against the rules. The young man that caught up with them reported that he was fine. I knew about these rules. Having fallen, the guy could not understand who tripped him, and other students were standing in front of him, who decided to remind the young man that fights in buildings were prohibited. Behind the guys was Jin, who after completing the exam received a text message from Professor Jai, who asked to help the newcomer. She was a little puzzled, because the professor was not one of those who said such things. She did not know what the young man had done. But it was not bad for a new student. At that moment, our hero flew into the classroom and managed to insert a USB flash drive into the computer. Enrollment in the class was completed. Sitting on a chair near the computer and trying to catch his breath, he decided that he was lucky because he managed to finish the exam. It wasn't Professor Ma's class, but the young man didn't have time to be picky right now. If the young man tries harder than the others, he will still be able to claim the title of the best student. Then he received an alert. Our hero was standing in the classroom and looking at his computer. After completing the entrance exam and receiving notification of the imminent start of the course, he went to the main auditorium. This day was too long for Su Chang. Approaching the audience, he was taken out by 2 guards. They informed the young man that only students and professors of Nest could enter. Then our hero said that he was studying at this university. The guards asked the young man to show his student ID if he studied here. The young man looked at them in bewilderment, not understanding where he had to get a student ID. Then Jin came up and showed the guards his student ID, informing the young man that he had just been given it. The girl gave it to Su Chang. The guys were walking down the corridor, and the young man was interested in whether his new girlfriend was going to the same lecture as him. She replied that these lectures were more suitable for her body, although Professor Ma's lectures would be more suitable for the young man. She asked the guy not to get upset too much. Now it can be very difficult to get into the list of the best. But the young man believed that it was possible to become the best student on the stream of a harsh teacher. He told Jin that he wasn't going to give up yet. The young man was looking at his student, and Jin praised his attitude. She didn't think that the new guy was a brave guy. They reached the lecture hall. Everyone was looking at our hero. After all, in front of them was the same guy Dragonfly from the cinema. Everyone was surprised that they were on the same stream. Then he was bombarded with phrases about the cinema and that the guys seemed to have seen a celebrity. The young man was surprised. One of the students slammed his fist on the table and asked what nonsense his classmates were talking about celebrities. He asked the young man why he spread his wings so brazenly in front of a crowd of people. Was he completely out of his mind? Su Chang was surprised at the young man, remembering him fighting in front of the university in the morning. The guy started asking our hero if he was aware of what he and the representatives of the department had been going through while rocking public opinion for a whole month. and what it cost them just not to let the scientists from the government grab him. The young man looked at the speaker in surprise, and after his words realized why everything had calmed down so quickly. These guys protected him. Hee-jin asked the young man not to pay attention to the chattering guy, telling Su-chan that he did what he did in order to save the girl who fell out of the window, and everyone understood it. The disciples, beaming with joy, smiled at the young man. Hee-jin said that if she were in his place, she would have done the same, and told the young man that he could be proud of himself, which embarrassed the guy a little. Our hero heard the girl's name for the first time and thought about the state she was in because of him, and after all she had suffered, she could say such words. She was too kind to him. The girl, leaving the classroom, said goodbye, because she had a small task from the professor. A student watched him from the back desks, who was very amused by all this. The bully who fought with the girl in the morning said that Hee-jin was so kind only for the reason that the young man was new. Then the student, who had been watching everything from the end of the class, asked the chatterer to shut up, having dealt with him with a blow on the table. After greeting his classmates, he stretched and said that he was glad to meet everyone and wanted to say something to everyone when they gathered. Then he wouldn't have to sit for so long. He turned to the guys with a request, and meanwhile his whole gang came into the classroom, and the student asked to give him the name of the best student. All the guys were unhappy with his request, because it was not so easy. The young man reported that he really wanted the medicine Cinderella, or as it was correctly called. He did not remember. He was not interested in the details, and the guys just needed to help him. In one case, he decided to confiscate the students' books for this semester. Then it turns out that the young man went to all the lectures alone. The gang of this student was prowling around the entire auditorium and took away students' cards from everyone, without which students could not attend the auditorium and go to lectures. Our hero could not believe his eyes and went on the attack, because he was not going to give up his student. The guy who also wanted to become the best student was not interested in anyone. Seeing a flying bug that flew straight to him like a baseball, he knocked out the student. The young man woke up already in the infirmary, in a bed with a bandaged head. He did not understand at first where he was. Not far from the bed was a table where Hee-jin was working. She explained to the young man that, having finished with her business, she returned to the classroom, and then found two unconscious and wounded, so she brought them to the medical center. The young man, remembering about the student ID and not finding it on his neck, realized that these hooligans had taken it from him. The girl also informed the young man that it was possible to easily get a new student. The young man decided that he seemed to be worried about a trifle. Hee-jin asked him to stay at the medical center while she received new student cards. Promising that she would return soon, she asked the young man to rest. The young man agreed with the girl and thought to himself that Hee-jin definitely deserved to be a representative of the department. She was so kind and caring. Then he remembered Mai-hee, who at first glance was the same, good and caring. His neighbor woke up. The young man was surprised that he was alive. Saying that the guy would not wait for his death, he asked what happened. Our hero told us what happened, and the young man was horrified to learn that their student tickets were taken by hooligans. But Su-chang immediately informed the young man not to worry, because the representative of the department went to get new ones for them. Then his story was interrupted by a guy and asked if the young man really believed it. If there was a goal to become the best student, then why bother the others to go to lectures? The young man of our hero asked to think. They could only stop those who really represented the competition, and whether, in his opinion, many students could be released in a day. A friend of our hero asked. Then the young man realized. Hee-jin went to select the students on her own, saving the guys. When she came to the lake, the girl asked the hooligans, just in case, if they just intended to return her students. One of the hooligans was laughing, and the second just asked if she had seen at least someone return something after such words. The girl was surrounded by a crowd of hooligans. Everything went according to the student's plan. He did not plan to take the students' other students. In fact, he needed a girl, because he knew that she would try to return the students' other guys. And from the very beginning I planned to lure her to this very territory next to the pond. The best student of the first semester, Park Hee-jin, was in front of him and began to deal with the rest of the students. Then the guys attacked her with attacks, but they did not understand that it was impossible to cope with it on Earth. Removing the students from the neck, the guy called the representative of the department and said that he was throwing them into the water. The girl stopped and looked in his direction. Then she rushed to the student and fell into a trap. She entered the territory of the floating. It was the strongest predator of the aquatic insect environment, and he wanted to deal with the girl. Surfacing from the water to get air, the swimmer attacked the girl again, believing that it would be easier to become a better student without her. The girl continued to fight with the guy, but if he tried to deal with her on the university grounds, it would cause too much suspicion. She realized that she had fallen into his trap. If she drowns, then no one will understand anything, the bully decided, and therefore lured her to the territory of the pond. The rest of the hooligans asked the guy to stretch the pleasure. They still ached in those places that the girl attacked. They offered options for what could be done with the girl before her death, and then something flew by the water very quickly that no one understood what it was. Everyone stood and stared with all their eyes. After surfacing and gulping air, Hee-jin looked in the direction of the savior, which said that no matter how much someone wanted to become a better student, didn't he have to choose human methods at the same time? He attacked the bully and held him by the breasts. The same looked at the young man. The hooligans were surprised that some guy came to the rescue. After they got a better look at the picture, in front of them was the same flying guy from the class. The young man was in the water and was holding a bully, and far away from them, Hee-jin was trying to recover. The swimmer asked the guy how he could stand on his feet after his blow. It surprised the bully, and he tried to hit the young man, but our hero saw and predicted his movements, just like last time. Faceted eyes worked, and the young man noticed that the opponent's movements were not so fast. He decided that he could defeat an opponent of this level. Hee-jin, knowing this bully and seeing what he could do, shouted at the young man to leave, because the floater started the attack. He tried to attack the young man from behind, but he managed to dodge. Flying away from the opponent, the young man asked the girl why she was trying to help him, because he was doing everything. Then Hee-jin, looking at the young man, explained to him that the floater was not equal to the rest, especially since they were not in the most advantageous position in this territory. The beetle inside the bully is a floater that lives in the water. It was worth the beetle to grab the hero and drag him under the water. That's it. The end. They needed to leave faster. Then the enemy took student tickets out of the water, which our friends had completely forgotten about. And the bully suggested that they run away if the guys wanted to. The whole gang stood around their leader. The young man was indignant because the enemy was outnumbered, and besides, the enemy wanted to fight where it was more convenient for him. Hee-jin understood everything and asked the young man to leave. He shouldn't have gotten into a fight. He had better get out of here. The young man did not understand the girl. Then she explained to him that their goal was she was the best student of the first semester. If they get what they want, they will surely return the student loans to the owners, the girl said. The girl believed that from the very beginning it was only her problem, which the guys accidentally got into. So without finishing, our hero said that he refused to leave. Su Chang was telling the girl that she shouldn't have thought that way. When he first came to the university, the girl promised him that he would not be alone. Everything was exactly like that, and the guy explained that he had not come alone. Another young man appeared behind the hooligans. He dealt with 2 hooligans and said about the rest, the young man was here to return his student. There was a locust in front of us. It uses strong legs from which thorns grow to hunt its victims. Seeing the young man, the leader realized that Locust Cha Hai-sun had already recovered. This guy was also a thorn for the bully, and therefore, after the representative of the department, he wanted to deal with him. While he was chatting, our hero tried to attack and take away the student ID that the opponent was holding. But he expected such an outcome, so the young man's attack was unsuccessful, and the bully again began to attack the young man, calling his attack a mistake and the fact that he approached him. But looking at his opponent, the young man hinted that it was not a mistake at all. All he needed was just not to get hit, and our hero attacked the enemy from different sides. The bully realized that the young man was now moving not just in a straight line as before, but he had room for maneuver. And the bully tried to understand, even with all these data, how the young man managed to fly like that. What kind of beetle he was. The young man flew to the enemy with all his might and thought that if he used the speed and put all the kinetic force into the blow, then the difference between the opponents in strength would not be important, and attacking with all his strength, the floater flew away from the young man. But because of the water, the damage was reduced by half and the attack was not so powerful as our hero hoped. The bully decided to cheat and deceive our guys. He invited them to stop and asked about the reason they had for the fight, saying that it was possible to solve everything with words, and offered to be honest with each other. While the bully looked in the direction of Hee-jin, who was standing not far from him. Then the villain began to ask the guys that they also wanted to become the best students in order to get Cinderella, whether his judgments were correct. At that moment, Hai-sun dealt with other hooligans. The leader continued to talk about competitors, which could become less and everyone would benefit from it. And while he was talking about our heroes, one of the gang emerged from the water behind Hee-jin and grabbed the girl. But she deftly attacked the enemy and was free. The gang leader was already standing behind her and wanted to get rid of the girl. At that moment, Su Chang flew up from above to the unsuspecting swimmer and grabbed him by the limbs, lifting him into the air. Now the villain was no longer in the water, and this was not his territory. Our hero, who grabbed the bully by the limbs, threw him back to his possessions. The young man did not care how much he wanted Cinderella. His methods were inhuman, and with these words he took the student tickets. Su Chang explained to the defeated floater that there was no point in becoming a man if he didn't even deserve to be called a beetle after all that he had done and was still ready to do. The young man stayed in the air and held his catch, so they successfully returned their students. He Jin looked with delight and surprise towards the young man. When they came to the auditorium, the introductory lecture was already over. The guys returned all the students' classmates, but decided to keep secret the fact that it was their merit. In fact, Jin asked not to tell anyone, because she was worried that everything happened through her fault. The girl begged so much that it was difficult to refuse her. The young man never got to the first lecture and let him not become a hero who returned student tickets, but he had a new home. Standing on the boxes, he inspected his new home, which he now had on the university grounds. He opened the box and saw the shape of the pulpit. He liked it very much. Now that our hero is far from his former home and entered the university, the student dormitory no longer seemed like something bad. But then someone's voice called him, and Hae-sung was telling the guy that the young man had performed well on the battlefield. Now the two of them were roommates. Our hero didn't know whether to be happy about it or not, because the guy was scaring him. Sitting on the floor and hugging our hero, Hyun-soo asked if the young man was drinking, to which he replied that just like everyone else, and in his head he was thinking that this guy wanted to drink with him alone. Only with him. But then the door opened and two girls came in. Jin with snacks, who talked about a spacious room, and a girl with whom locusts had fought earlier in the morning. She had a large crate of beer in her hands. The young man was confused, and Jin apologized for coming without warning. They wanted to celebrate the beginning of the semester today. It just happened that she and Hae-sung would live in the same room, and she offered our hero a drink with everyone for company. Perhaps the whole point was that the young man had not been drinking for a long time. But after he got to this strange university, after he discovered his wings, he thought about it sitting on the floor of his new dorm room and having fun with his new friends. The young man became very easy. Somewhere in the woods outside of Nast, the bully was floating and reporting to someone who asked about Professor Jin's student, whom he could not figure out. But he immediately relented and said that his main goal was to attract attention. He should have understood that. A beetle girl with a beetle head with red eyes was sitting on a tree, and told the floater that those who could not cope with the hunt were eliminated. The bully prayed that he would do better next time and would definitely get Cinderella. But the girl didn't need anything like that, and having descended from her tree on which she was sitting, she dealt with the bully in an instant. Since he could not cope with some newcomer, even being so strong, he should have been ashamed. But there was no need to worry. Lifting the beetle's head, the girl said, the head would be pleased, because they found what you were looking for. The next day, in the audience of the Department of the Advantages of Insects, the guys sat all and discussed each their own. Today was the first lecture on the main subject, practical fight against bugs. Our hero sat and humbly waited for what they would be taught. He was insanely nervous. Jin sat down with him and asked the young man not to be nervous. Today is the first lecture, and they said that there would be only a simple test. She tried to calm him down by saying that nothing complicated should be. The young man did not know much, but she wanted to help him. He decided to take it in his hands and calm down. Then the teacher entered the classroom, the same one our hero had already seen earlier. He was talking about a simple test that was discussed yesterday. The results of this test will affect the students' grades, and including the chainsaw. He asked to take everything into account that they could die. The young man looked at everything that was happening in shock. Outside of Nest there was a training ground where all the students were. Our hero was running away from a teacher with a chainsaw, not understanding what was happening at all. Where did this teacher come from at all, and why was he chasing after everyone trying to finish them off? Hae-sun ran next to our hero and told him that it was the curator, Professor Jae-jeon. The young man was horrified to hear that it was a professor. Jin was running nearby, explaining that the practical fight against bugs meant using the acquired abilities in battle. Their role, the role of the students of this department, was to fight with guys like that Mantis, who had already met our hero earlier. The young man remembered that guy in horror. The teacher stood behind the guys and explained to them that it was at the introductory lecture, but they did not appear at it. The power of insects is a weapon, and there will be those who use it to harm. That's why students had to learn how to fight. That's why Nest has to find all the insect people and protect them. The teacher reminded that only the strongest will survive. If they wanted Cinderella, they had to move. The first test is a game of hide and seek. It was necessary to use all their insect powers and run away from it. Those whom the teacher catches will fly out at the same second and they will not be able to become the best students. Everyone was horrified to hear this and were surprised. And the test was starting right now, John was saying, wielding his chainsaw, which our heroes were dodging. It was crazy for the young man, but if John said that they should learn to fight, then why he told them to run away was a mystery to him. After all, when our hero met that mantis, all he could do was run away. Sun, dodging the old man's punches, didn't understand how he could be so fast. Then he was almost hit, but Su Chang managed to pull his friend away from the saw in time. Then the teacher noticed the faceted eyes of the dragonfly and realized that the young man had read the movements of the chainsaw. For the guy who claimed that he had come here to get rid of the wings, he himself was a painfully good ace, as if he had turned into a real dragonfly. With these words he divided our heroes with his saw. Calling him a monster, the young man immediately remembered the frightened Himai, who huddled in a corner at the sight of him and stood up as a stopper. The teacher ordered him to look both ways and reaching for Su Chang's head shouted that he was running away. Then He Jin came to his aid. The girl looked at the guy and said that he would not give up if he was caught. It was necessary to get ready. While Su Chang and He Jin were standing aside, Sun decided to attack the professor and invited him to rest with a clay mask, and at these words threw clay in his face from under his feet. The same one believed that throwing dirt at the senior meant that they did not respect the professor, but it was a smoke screen. The smoke screen was so strong that the teacher could not see anything. Our heroes, meanwhile, were running away until they were seen through the smoke screen by this old man, who, according to Sun, was some kind of energizer. In the end, he himself told them to run away, and the guys ran, having come up with a detour maneuver with mud. The Nesta underground isolation ward, the corridor of the isolation ward along which the woman was walking. Those who resisted lay under her feet. She found the mantis that was chained up and asked if he was alive, because how could they do this to someone who was still alive? The girl was looking at the mantis through the bars, and using a student ID, she tried to open the cage, but, unfortunately, it was impossible to bypass the security system with them. Therefore, the girl prepared something and her assistant was already hurrying to her. It was a B-guy who stole the security card from the professor's office. Now there were lectures, so the young man was not caught. The girl hugged the boy and told him how nice it was on his part. The university forced him to retire and it was such a cruel place. The young man melted under her words. Then, in his arms, he thought about why he stole the professor's thing. Why for this woman he didn't know, and when he got here, the B-guy had a lot of questions. The red dot on his neck was throbbing at that moment. The girl took the pass and asked not to worry about trifles while she opened the doors. It was better for the young man to say hello. There was a mantis in front of them, who came out of the cage and saw insect people. And then he smelled a wonderful smell. The beetle girl hugged the bee guy, who was terrified of the mantis and said that everything was as the head said. The mantis behaved just like an insect. And she threw the young bee right into the arms of the mantis. It was a gift from her. The mantis, looking at the young man, understood that this was his food. And while the mantis was finishing the food, the girl looked at this sight. Meanwhile, outside the nest, our hero was standing and trying to catch his breath. It's been an hour and a half of the lecture they just ran. The guys nearby stretched and thought about how they barely managed to escape, while the young man was outraged by the test. While they were running away from the teacher, most of the classmates were caught. Our hero was interested in whether all the guys who were caught would fly out. Most likely it was so. Professor Jai always kept his word. At that moment, he was hanging all the students upside down to a tree. The young man thought about how this teacher instills discipline. It was not for nothing that he felt something was wrong at the first meeting. This professor seemed abnormal to him, and sitting down on the ground, the young man regretted that he did not get into Professor Ma's course. He Jin tried to reassure the young man that the couple would end in an hour and he needed to be patient a little more. The young man asked He Jin if the professor was going to fail everyone, to which the girl replied that he had such a teaching method. Then Sun asked them to be quiet. The professor was already very close and other students were running away in front of him, stumbling and falling. The girl pulled her ankle, and her friend informed the professor that her friend. But without finishing, the professor was already looking at them and suggesting that they run. It didn't matter if her leg was dislocated or broken. The girl had to run. The professor began to attack the girls, but then our hero stopped him, holding the professor's hand with a chainsaw. He looked at the young man in bewilderment, who shouted to him that it was already too much and that the professor was overdoing it. Friends who were sitting in ambush were shocked by what their partner was doing. Besides, today was only the first day. The young man asked the professor if he had gone too far, to which the professor replied that it was true. Really, this couple of girls would already be dead. And he reminded the young man about the mantis. Was our hero going to lecture him the same way? And the professor was not joking when he said that all those caught by him would fly out of here. There was about an hour left until the end of the lecture, and the teacher offered them a game. If they could hit him at least one blow before the end of the hour, then he would not only for a couple. He would generally close his eyes to all today's failures as if nothing had happened. However, if they can't, then the main character and his friends will fly out of here. The professor believed that the novice was not the time to think about others. He still had a long way to go. He needed to understand his strength. Maybe the young man came here to get rid of the dragonfly's powers, but if that happened, he could not survive without the power. At this moment, the girl was leading the mantis through the forest, and he was rushing from side to side. He felt a very familiar smell. He smelled very tasty, and the mantis was going crazy from this smell. I think it was the smell of that dragonfly.